Whenever I've talked to or seen any of the most consistently successful teams, athletes or coaches, one thing they all have in common is a relentless attitude to improvement. Right? They have this insatiable desire to get better. And importantly, they have an attitude to improvement that's independent of outcome. They don't wait for the exceptional to happen. They don't wait till they have a really good day or a really bad day. They have this insatiable appetite for learning all the time. So it doesn't matter whether their performance on any given day, whether it's training or racing, was good, bad, or indifferent. They're always like, what can I learn from that? What went well, what didn't go well? How do I get better next time? Let's say I can train a person or a crew to be technically really skilled, and I can give them a training program so we maximize their physiology, make them really fit and strong. What that does is that raises the ceiling of potential. It gives us the potential for high performance, but what it doesn't give us is consistency of performance. And of course, as a coach, you end up being interested in what gives us consistency of performance. And eventually you realize it's things like how people manage pressure. So why is it sometimes when the pressure's on, people fold, and sometimes they produce their best? What can you do about it? Why do some teams gel and some don't? What can you do about it? Sometimes you put the 8 best people in a boat together and it doesn't work. And sometimes it's because there are individuals or an individual in the boat that's a mood hoover and it just sucks everyone else down. And in business, I talk about like brilliant jerks, people who are tolerated because they're brilliant, but they bring the overall performance down. So let's say you put an athlete in the boat and they're 20% better than the person they replaced, but they bring everyone else's performance down by 10%. So the boat overall goes slower, even though they're a better athlete.
Hey, what is up? Welcome back to Last Stroke Counts. Today's guest is a former GB junior and under 23 and now runs a business in the medical training field. I'm sure I've butchered that. But Ben Tipney, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, I know you've done a bit of rowing and coaching as well, but I think what you're doing now is really interesting to get into. We were talking a little bit before about transferable skills and those kind of things, and we'll get there definitely. I think that's going to be interesting. Almost sort of going on from our last podcast, which I know isn't out yet, but probably will be by the time you're listening to this. So that's going to be interesting to maybe see some similarities with that as well.
Yeah, and what Matt Britton talked about, obviously after having stepped down from Google, he's really interested in performance coaching to people in different industries, but I understand you do something along those lines. Would you mind?
Yeah, well, I'm interested to listen back to that one myself now, so I'll be looking for that one coming out.
Yeah, that's good.
Your business is in what field?
Field of human factors. So looking at all the things that go on in organizations that help and hinder people from doing whatever it is you're asking them to do. The world we work in, our market is healthcare. So it's mostly NHS, but not exclusively. We do a bit of work outside the UK, though most of our work is UK based, and obviously, so NHS and private sector. So looking at all the things that happen within people, so all the things that make us human, and then things that happen within, so interpersonally, but within teams, so teamwork, leadership, communication, all that kind of stuff, all the interpersonal factors, and then looking at external factors, all the things that happen around people, equipment, environment, rules, policies, process, all the organizational structures that either help or hinder people. And obviously in healthcare, the consequences of variation in performance. It's interesting, the different language. So in healthcare, it's talking a lot about error and things like that and harm. And I find myself reverting back to performance-based language. Of course, the word performance means different things. In healthcare, it tends to mean targets and finances and things like that. You have a performance manager. In healthcare, they'll be involved with financial regulation, that kind of stuff.
So having been an athlete yourself now, you're looking at other people both physiologically and psychologically, yeah?
Physiologically, psychologically, in the systems they work in, yeah.
The fascinating art/science of high performance.
As humans in
the magic of...
Yeah, what helps and hinders people from performing in whatever context they're in.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. And definitely, like, you can sort of see it both ways. Obviously, what you did in rowing has helped you do it later. And I think what you do now can be really interesting for hopefully some people that's listening to gain from. But we always start where we should, which is the story of how you first found rowing in the first place.
Yeah, so So when I was young, I was at my local primary school, struggled with school, was diagnosed with ADHD. That's been quite an interesting journey for me because I've actually found out recently I would have been one of the first few hundred kids in the UK to be diagnosed. So this has been 1991 when it wasn't really a thing. I mean, it's only really been much more recently that it's become talked about a lot. And I suppose it being in the public eye has meant I've thought about it more recently. My wife said to me quite recently, like, what support did you get in strategies? And I said, well, I didn't. Just got put on Ritalin and that was it. And the reason I mention that is because my mum's told me more recently is that rowing was one of the sports that this educational psychologist had recommended. I had a bit of a convoluted school history, went to 5 different schools, ended up at Shiplake College, which back then wasn't quite the high-flying rowing school it is now, but it was a rowing school.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I picked it was so that I could do it, and I did it. But I wasn't... I picked it up technically. So I was always the kid at school who didn't get picked for sports teams. And I'm sure there are lots of rowers out there who can identify with that. Like my mum still got a picture, I don't know why she kept it, of me coming last in my school 1500 metres when I was about 11 years old. I don't know why a school makes 11-year-old kids do a 1500 metre race, but there you go. But that, whatever sport it was, I was always the kid that wasn't picked. And I got into rowing, and actually from a sort of technical perspective, picked it up quite quickly, but I was always told I'd be too small. So I was a B team rower through J14.
Who was skating Shiplake back then?
In terms of the top end, no one that would, I think, be known these days.
We've got a lot of older listeners tuning into the podcast.
I can't even remember the name of most of the coaches. The one coach I do remember, I might not mention the name because I remember him because so all the way through J14s, J15s, I was a B team rower, and J16s still kind of in and out of we didn't even have a B crew, and I wasn't in the A crew, so I wasn't really doing much. And I said to him one day, I want to be in the school's first state one day, and I have this ambition, and he laughed. It's one of the things I think back on a lot when I was in coaching of like things that not to do.
Yeah.
And
I had a similar experience when the coach laughed at me and I told him my ambition. Suffice to say, I wasn't running for them for much longer after that.
Well, basically that's what happened. So I suppose, the year group I was in at Shiplake was quite successful in terms of winning medals at nationals and things like that. But as a J16, I mean, it's understandable that as a J16, I was about 50 kilos and pulled a 734 erg. So I can understand why they thought maybe I wasn't going to cut it. But I wasn't wanted by the J16 out. So I was actually, my first experience of Henley was doing Henley Temple qualifiers as a 50 kilo J16, pulling a 734 and nearly qualifying for the Temple in this Shiplake second day. So that was in 1999, would have been my first Henley qualifiers experience. But I left not only for that reason, and I went to Marlow Rowing Club. I went to Borlase Grammar School in Marlow, and which again has since obviously gone through periods of being extremely strong, didn't have much of a program at the time. And 18 months later, I came second at GB trials. And I look back and I'm still not quite sure what happened in that 18-month period, how I've gone from being told it's laughable to be good enough to be in the first day of a mid-ranking school to coming second at GB.
Is it possible you don't remember because you just locked in so hard?
I was going to say, is it like, fuck you, I'll show you then?
Yeah, and there is something, yes, I think there is a big part of that, and I kind of, at some point, I think, circle back to that, because I think there's that, developing that mindset is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
That mindset was such a strong driver for me. I still remember, so I was really struggled with confidence at school in lots of ways, with lots of things, particularly with sport. And I remember being in university, my second year of university, and they had us do this exercise where everyone in the kind of class had to say an adjective, and then everyone else had to look at the person they thought they were talking about. Mm-hmm. And someone said confident, and everyone turned and looked at me, and I was like,
What now?
Like, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this.
Yes, please. Okay, new rules. No sponsors. This is ours.
What the fuck? How is that? Your perception of yourself, and kind of like, I was like, this is so So basically, what I went off, and my first year out in J17 year, first year juniors, did anything special. Sort of raced and won a few pots, but nothing that really stood out. I did okay. I went to Nat Champs and didn't get through the semi-final in junior singles. Yeah, it was kind of. But then I happened to be training one day, and I can't exactly how I remember we met, but I met a guy called Ray Ward. And I don't know if the name will ring any bells, but he was coaching Colin Smith when Colin Smith, who's a name that some people might recognise, went on to be a successful Olympian for Great Britain. He'd just moved to the UK from Zimbabwe, and Ray had been coaching him. And they were training at Leander, but mostly down at Dorney. And this was when Dorney was only 1,000 metres. And
Dorney was 1,000 metres?
So Dorney was in the process of being built.
Okay.
And two lakes had to get dug out in the middle, yeah.
Wait, what?
So it was a gravel pit.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought Dorney was just dug out as a 2,000 metre course.
Yeah, but slow was. Yeah. So at this time, so Dorney was at the time about 1,000 metres, and they were gradually making it bigger. So what I still remember training there with my brother one day, and he went up because two of the lanes still had a big pile of gravel in it, and he was in the wrong lane. He stacked his single straight up the pile of gravel at about 1,200 metres, wherever it was. And he said, well, I was on my own, as often happens at clubs. Mile isn't. It's historically produced lots of very, very good juniors. But the year I was in happened to be there was no one else really around, so I was on my own. And he said, "Do you want to come down and do some training with us at Dorney?" And so the height of my ambition was, I thought, I was looking at trajectory, I thought, if I can just about get to sort of maybe get in the top 30 in the singles and then switch to sweep, because it was always harder to get in the sculling team and you sort of sneak into the last sweep coupe space and just sort of make something. And went down to Dorney and was training with Colin. It's a kind of classic thing of when you train with someone that's better, you start to raise your game. And I remember Ray saying, I think you should be aiming for about the top 5 or 6 at trials. I'm thinking, what? Because, only a year before that, I'd been told something very different. Anyway, we went to junior trials and, I came second. Colin beat me. And one of my things I hung on to for all these years, I beat Matt Langridge by half a second over 5,000 metres in the year that he went on to win the gold at Junior Worlds. Which I think is is he still the only person to do that for Great Britain at Junior Worlds?
Junior Worlds, probably in single.
I think it's still the only person to win gold for GB at the Junior Worlds. Boys.
Sculling.
In a single.
In a single,
yeah, in the single, yeah. Maybe
you beat him.
I'm by half a second over 5,000 metres. I think the caveat I should probably put in that is twofold. One is that I think he fell in on his way up to the start and had to get back in the boat and was soaking wet.
That's his fault.
And secondly, he proceeded to absolutely spank me for the rest of the year and everybody else. So, but yeah, it was one of those things where you sort of looking up the list and thinking, and suddenly you think, how on earth did that happen? And another nice sort of thing that's stuck with me is that there were 2 guys in my year at Shiplake who were essentially sort of being seen as the next best thing. They're the best athletes the school had ever had. They were brilliant and they pulled big ergs, and they were being told, and everyone was being told that they were amazing. And bear in mind, I'm being told I'm not even good enough to be in the same boat. They came 98th and 112th. The fact that I remember the details of that tells us something.
Yeah.
And then the next day I beat their pair in my single, which was quite nice.
Oh yeah.
So, and I think that strength and a kind of like that whole kind of like proving people wrong and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and look, again, it didn't turn into anything miraculous. I ended up going to the Coupe in a quad, and we went to the Coupe and came 4th or 5th or something. It was nothing, but I suppose even the way I'm talking about that, it's interesting how we see performance and how we see success and failure and how we.
So the GB vets expecting to win on the first try is.
Well, but plenty of people do, don't they? But
also, there's no lightweight as junior. So you're competing with people a year later, you wouldn't be.
So my junior year, I pulled a 6:49, and a few years later, Rachel Gamble-Flint, as a junior, pulled a 6:48.
Remember?
We were both coaching at Great Marlow once, so I told her that. I said, "Hey, yeah, You beat my junior as a junior, and I think 3 of the girls on the GB potential camp beat me on the bench press test. And it's one of the things that and I remember in that lead up to that, when I left Shipley and I was writing at Marlow, I had this thing that I'd written. I put it up on my wall in my bedroom. It said, "Never accept someone else's perceptions of your limits." As I've got older, I've added to that. I said, never accept anyone's perception of your limits, including your own. So I think we put those on ourselves as well. So I think we're all very quick to tell ourselves and other people what they can and can't achieve. And I think you need realism, but people often, I think that courage and realism are on a spectrum in terms of ambition. And I don't see it like that. I think you should be as ambitious as you like with your objectives, with your goals, with your vision, but you have to be realistic about what it'll take to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's never pulled under a 7-minute 2K and they say, well, I want to go sub 6, never tell them that they can't, but be realistic about what it'll take to do it, about the training that it'll take to do it, because I think that's the bit where you need realism. So
I love that so much. The quote, how you put it, I also agree. Most dreams go to die due to self-limiting beliefs, and they're all self-imposed. And when you actually really delve into that issue, you know that those limitations only exist in your head, and you're delusional because on the thing that is in your head hasn't materialized in the real world yet. But plenty of people would have said, there's a story of Steve Jobs before releasing an iPhone. It had a plastic screen or something. Mm-hmm. And then 2 weeks before, he was like, no, it needs to be glass screen. They're like, it's impossible. He was like, I don't care, get it done. 2 weeks later, got a glass screen. So it's delusional.
But there's things that would have had to happen. So you can't just sort of manifest it out of nothing if I hadn't done any training or, I think there's lots of things happened that helped me get there. It wasn't just a belief on it, but, going to train at Dorney. But I think a massive part of that was training with someone that was better, but also the person who was coaching that person saying to me, I think you're maybe better or quicker than you think you are. So, and it's those sliding doors moments of having someone that helps just shift that pattern, shift that belief a little bit.
Yeah.
The one thing that I would, kind of going back to that thing around kind of proving people wrong, is I think that can become quite toxic.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is, so when I finished juniors, I was always thinking under 23 lightweight, this is going to be my time, right? Because I was natural lightweight. I was 67 kilos as a junior. Of course, things don't stay like that. But, and sort of, I was on my own at Marlow. There wasn't really much of a senior squad at the time. And went to Leander to sort of surround myself with better athletes. And, for the reasons I'm sure you guys did as well. And lots of other people have. And looking back, so as an athlete, I was really inconsistent. And when I look back, I realized what was happening a lot of the time, I think, is because I had that fuel of people, everyone telling me I'm not good enough and I've got to prove them wrong. As soon as I actually start doing well, so I've now made GB Junior team, I've been sort of accepted into Leander, which obviously isn't a given. Suddenly people are saying, okay, we think you are good enough, and now we expect something. We expect you to perform. So suddenly that fuel is taken away.
Yeah.
And so what do I do with that? And I'm not consciously thinking this. And I look back and I look at, so basically what I was doing subconsciously was manufacturing ways to implode and underperform. And then of course, people are telling you you're not good enough again. So you get your fuel back. So you really go for it and you get this energy. And then of course, people start telling you they expect things from you again. And you get these massive highs. And I think looking back, that combined with ADHD, where emotional regulation is an issue, it's a recipe for massive ups and downs and inconsistency. And
when everyone starts out as an underdog, so anyone who gets anywhere in anything has this moment when you're like, oh shit, now the pressure's on, right? Because we're saying no pressure on me, I'm not supposed to win, so great, we'll go for it. And then it's a completely different thing when you're
and I think the other thing I often say to people is you have to find other things in your life other than that one thing and I think this is true in the medical field, and I've talked about this on a medical podcast before. I think there's a lot in common with medical training and rowing, and similar with other kind of endurance sports, swimming, triathlon, where the training is very intense and you live in this very narrow but very intense world, do a lot of one thing. without realizing it, your identity becomes wrapped up in that one thing. And therefore, how that one thing is going affects your sense of self and worth massively. Mm-hmm. So essentially what happened is I went from this kid who really lacked confidence to having lots of self-confidence, but it was entirely wrapped up in how well my rowing was going. So when it was going well, I was a complete pain in the ass because I thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. And I still look back and I cringe so much at some of the things I did and I said, the way I treated people, because in my head, not consciously, I think I'm better than everybody else. I'm worth more than other people. And it obviously is awful. But then when things were going badly, I was incredibly hard on myself internally. Now, but externally, I was very defensive. I was blaming anything and anyone other than myself. But actually what was going on internally, I was beating myself up. You're not good enough. All of that kind of stuff. So I think finding other things, being aware of that potential for that to happen, I think is something to watch for. And that's basically how things played out all through my sort of under 23 period.
I think it's a massive thing. It's why so many athletes, and I'm sure it's every single sport, kind of deal, like, how do you move on from rowing when you've become, or to all your families and friends, you're like, I'm Tom the rower, and every Christmas you're getting a rowing related mug or a this or a that off every member of the family, and then you're like, all of a sudden you're like, I don't have this thing anymore. And like you said, like to performance. I remember as well when we spoke to Lola Anderson, and she said when she got injured, she really struggled because the way the way she dealt with stress in her life was rowing. I was like, oh, that's great. Like, because like now if you're injured, now I not only don't have the thing that I was using, which again was why, and it's just something that comes up a lot. So many other high performers will say you have to have that other thing outside of it, whatever it is, whatever the other passion that you have
to find something or you just have to find a way of not attaching your whole sense of self to one thing, because it's a precarious knife edge to be on.
Ultimately, it's a number on either a monitor or on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, you're basically reliant on things that you can't control, because so much of what there's only so much we can control. Particularly when you look at results over performance, there's only so much we can control. And that played out massively, and I don't think I ever actually enjoyed. When I look back and people, there's two things. One is I don't ever feel I was successful. And we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast started. I don't feel like I ever succeeded in rowing.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I never did enough. Whether my talent, I reached the limit of my talent or I didn't make the most of it, I don't know. But, and I think some of that comes from being in an environment where you're surrounded by multiple Olympic gold medalists at every turn. When you're at Leander and you're looking up at the board, the big board on the wall and all the gold letters of all the famous athletes that have gone before and are still around. So I was coming into Leander when Steve Redgrave had just retired, Matt Pinson and James Cracknell were still around, and there was still these superstars of the sport globe, people that would be known well outside of the sport. And so, going to a couple of under 23 world champs, never making the A final, getting to the final of Henley but not winning it, feeling like, well, I've just done a lot of nearly stuff. And I genuinely don't think I ever managed to take pleasure from it. And my mum asked me about that a few times, like, but you made the world championships, did this? Oh, yeah, but I didn't.
Yeah, same thing, 3 bronze medals.
You have got the Henley medal, though.
A Henley medal, but it's easy. It's so easy just to write that off. But I have got this.
This is the point. When you attach your worth to that one thing, it's never enough.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how. So my brother was physiologically much more talented athlete than me. So my brother won J16 singles at Nat Schools as a J15, won champ singles as a J16. And it was he and Zach Purchase from the same year. So he and Zach did double at Junior Worlds. So he was in the Coopers at J16. Two. In fact, he was in the quad with Zach and Tom Wilkinson. So you will know.
Yep.
At Worlds, and then did the double with Zach. So I got to sort of know Zach a little bit, and was in the friends and family stand. at London when Zach and Mark got a silver medal, which those of us looking from the outside, given that actually in the season and the run up to that, was actually a phenomenal result.
Yeah.
It was actually a big step forward from where they'd been earlier in the year. But he was absolutely devastated.
Yeah.
Because it's in context, and I've told a few people that story. That imagine watching someone you know win a medal at a home Olympics as someone who I was 29, right? So I always, as this kind of under 23, I had London 2012 in my sights. That was the thing. I was obsessed with. Like, I'm going to be on my physical peak. This is it. That's what I'm aiming for. And I was in that sort of peer group, like the athletes who were in the lightweight 4 in London. That was my peer group. The guys I was in, they were either just ahead or just behind me. That was always and obviously it didn't happen. So for me, I'd have given anything to be in that position. But when you got the gold from the previous one, it doesn't feel like success. And it's a really hard thing to avoid.
Yeah. And being
when things are measured in a very singular way.
And being, like you said, in that system of success where you get to the point where that there is actually, you get to this strange point where you can't overachieve. Because you go to an event to win it. The plan is to win it.
Yeah.
Anything but winning is failure. And winning that's what we planned. That's what we came here to do.
And when you win, it's like, anybody can win one.
Yeah.
And until someone surpasses the 5 consecutive goals, there's always more that's been achieved. It's like anything in life, isn't it? It doesn't matter how much you have. There's always someone with more, and there's always someone with less. And this whole, like, the reality. And people say, you shouldn't compare yourselves to others. A, that's not realistic, and B, there are times where that's important. You will never get away from it, and it doesn't have to be destructive as long as it doesn't become bigger. And that's the issue. The issue is when comparison with others in the world around us becomes bigger than doing things for our own intrinsic reasons and figuring out why things drive us intrinsically. And that's a kind of journey of self-discovery that I don't think ever really finishes.
And I also think you get to this, I sort of was like, I'll, ever think all my life problems will be solved when I win an Olympic gold medal, right? That will fix everything. And I think that's why you get athletes.
I'll feel okay about myself.
Everything, I would have achieved enough.
Yeah.
And then you get that and you realise, I always laugh, it goes back to the Cool Runnings John Candy quote, if you're not enough without it, you'll never be enough with it. It's not going to fix.
A gold medal is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
But if you're not enough without it, you'll never be enough with it.
Yeah, I love that.
That might be my favourite film. No, not might be. It is my favourite film of all time. My record is 3 times in a day.
Yeah.
Nice.
That is 9. I've just admitted that. I watched that film so many times.
Yeah, I love it. And
it's good attention. So I also think 3 films.
Well, you see, ADHD. It's
selective, isn't it?
No attention or hyperfixation.
Yeah.
Right. So that's it. Certain things, when something gets your attention, you can fixate on it for hours. Yeah.
I know that all too well, Ben.
You also then get into, I was speaking to someone else who they're kind of talking about if rowing and winning and being successful was what you think was filling the sort of void. Are you then? Am I now sort of? How many athletes are self-medicating effectively with a high-performance sport, especially things like ADHD, because this amount of exercise is going to calm your mind and your brain, or make you feel more normal.
Repetitive activity,
make you feel more, and
giving your brain something to focus on that's repetitive, and 100%. Well, this is the sort of stuff that Kath Bishop's talked about, right? The long win, and I think, how do we define success? And of course, this is massive particularly when you're coaching youngsters and stuff, because that was the next phase for me. Was and I always, the way I tell the story when I'm doing intros and stuff, when I'm running training courses and what have you, is I retired through. There's a sort of stock quote, that I use, like, life's not a fairy story. I don't have a story of going to the Olympics and winning gold medals. I retired at a grand age of 23 with a back injury, which is sort of half true. The reality of it is I did a lot of burning the candle at both ends in the middle. I wanted to make the GB team. I wanted to get a 2-1 university, and I wanted to have a social life, and I kind of did all of those things through university. So I did one of those weird degrees that it gives you interest in lots of things but didn't qualify you to do anything. It's called Leadership in Sport, and it was an amalgamation of sports science, or the anatomy and physiology, coaching, leadership and management, and sports psychology. So it's interesting. I qualified me to do anything. But I was obviously doing all the...
Was this a Reading?
This was a Reading
Was
uni,
it Will Round? Not quite.
No, Will. So actually, Rob, who now coaches at Leander.
Morgan? No.
Rob Morgan,
Yeah,
who
Morgan.
coaches
Shout out to Rob Morgan.
Yeah. He listens. He'll be listening.
Now he's going to, how dare you not remember my surname immediately?
He told me at Henley, he was like, you two, what did he say? You two hold very rarefied air in my household, because I'd actually sit down and listen to what you have to say.
Like Rob.
Yeah, there you go. That's definitely a Rob. Hi, Rob.
So Rob, you're listening. Hello.
So he was running the Reading program, and kind of while I was there, not long after I left Reading, moved over to Leander. So he was running the Reading program, and but I'd been running at Leander in my gap year, and I sort of felt I wanted to stay there. So I rode for Reading at Boosa, and but basically rode most of the time down at Leander with the lightweight group there. And
who was it? Was it Ali Brown?
See, Ali was around, Matt Beachy was around, Ross Hunt. So basically, the Leander management,
the Three Musketeers,
was basically the sort of a big course. So yeah, Dave Curry, but there was quite a few, because of course we were that's really kind of in a period where lightweight rowing was still big. We didn't know it was going to, there was no kind of mention of it kind of coming out of the Olympics stuff at that stage. So it was a big group. It was a high standard. Mark Hunter obviously was there. So I was sort of a couple of years behind Dave Curry and Ross Hunter in that sort of group. And I'd had those couple of under 23s where I felt like things hadn't. And look, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I look back, and one of the things I talk about is like the importance of a kind of balance between individual and collective responsibility for stuff. And I look back and I think I was a difficult athlete to manage. Rob might have opinions on that. But I think it was very up and down. And I think to the outside world, it would seem that like I was blaming everything and everyone else. And I look at some of the stuff we did on training camps and, pre-Worlds training camps, and think about sort of what potential speed I was in the lightweight double for both of those Worlds, and it didn't manifest at the Worlds. I think part of that was sort of the way I think we were managed as athletes, and partly with my attitude and the way I handled myself. But it meant I came out of it not feeling great, so I got my 2-1 by 0.2%. I did have a social life. But all of those were compromised in some way. I didn't do any of them very well, but I just about got all of them, and I was pretty burnt out, to be honest. I think I was particularly disappointed after the under-23s in 2005. I had that horrible experience of being rowed through in a repechage and being put into the C final. And if anyone's rowed at Worlds will know that feeling of that, where you've not even got into the AB semi, and we got rowed through the last 200 meters. I think that had a big impact, particularly because we come 10th in 2004, and we really felt we had the chance of doing a lot better. And I came out really kind of demotivated to carry on. So I took a year out, and I went and did a postgrad gap year at campus school down on the South Coast, just coaching rowing and just having a bit of fun, really. And I carried on training, but not full time, and came back to Leander the following year with the intent to sort of push on and try and get into the senior team. And I basically wasn't fast. I wasn't, as you imagine, I'd probably done half the training as everyone else. So I was now 6 months behind. And I was struggling with my back was giving me problems. So I was struggling with injury. And of course, the more you take the time, so I was just slipping further and further back. And I still remember
familiar story. Yeah,
I still remember the being called into the office at Leander to be told, basically, you're not cutting it. And I still remember Mark Banks saying, "Look, it's not that you don't have the talent. We know you've got, talent, but right now you're not performing, and you need to go away and get yourself sorted out and come back." And so, yeah, then there was about a year and a half, 2 years of trying to do rehab and trying to work out what the best way of doing it, and getting on the bike, and am I trying to get back into rowing? Am I going to go into cycling? What am I going to do? And the brain's, this is part of the ADHD brain, desperately trying to find something to latch onto, but losing motivation, and having weeks where I did no training and weeks where I did loads, and I was on the bike for hours, and then I was swimming and I was doing this. And eventually I just lost the will to carry on. And anyone listening to this, you know, will know that rowing, if you don't really want it, you can't, especially at the highest level. You've got to really want it. Whether that's the will to get yourself up at 6 a.m. and go and train in the middle of January, or whether it's the will to push yourself to the ragged edge earlier in the race than you think you can to go half a second faster. Like if you don't really want it, and I think I just got to that point where, and the opportunity to do some coaching came along. I started doing a bit of part-time coaching at Claire's Court. I'd actually started doing that. So Tom Josh, if you had on before.
Yeah.
So Josh and I were in the 40 quad together, made the final in 2001
against
an Aussie crew.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So we beat the Leander crew. We were a composite. So this was back when the 40 could have composites. So we're in a 4-way composite. Burway, Marlow, Reading, Maidenhead, composite. Barry Gardner, Rich Ellerer, myself and Josty. Coached by Jez Moore.
Oh yeah. Wait,
Jez as well.
was that the race where it was even until the last 100 meters?
No, well, so I happen to know Jez quite well because he I'll tell him to listen to this. He's my uncle, but not by blood. So
okay.
Jez
used
to be married to my mum's sister. So yeah. So
you did some psychological work with him.
The golden aster, and then you kept talking about the one who wins is the one who actually wants it the most, and all that sort of thing.
So the sort of famous, I think Jocelyn might have mentioned this, before the semi-final with Leander. So we were a bit of a ragtag bunch of guys, didn't have much time on the boat together because we basically, all 4 of us didn't really have anyone to row with our clubs. So we got together, did the squad. And we were coming to the semi-final against Leander, which we knew was going to be a tight race. It was 4 other, we were all in trials. I think Josty ended up in the Worlds in the sweep team. Me, Rich and Barry all ended up in the Coop sculling team. And the Leander quad was another 4 guys who were all in the GB Junior setup. So we knew it was going to be a close race. And Jez had a guy come down who was a medalist in the World Karate Championships. Seriously tough guy. And he told us this thing, which I really love, and I've used it a lot since in coaching, which is you have to learn to love the pain. And the point he made was athletes try and ignore pain. Like, say there's no pain. He said your body won't let you do it. And he was saying, like, once you start to go anaerobic at minute and 20 seconds into the race and you'll start to feel it, you have to go, oh yeah, here's the pain. This is good. Because if it's hurting me, it's hurting them. They're going to try and ignore it. I'm going to love it. I'm going to want more of this. I'm going to try and embrace this. I'm going to say love the pain. So anyway, it's one of those things. I think 17-year-old boy, 18-year-old boys, right? This is like red back to a ball.
Yeah.
And like, I think the end danger was just like, I think Justy said this in the box, like, it's like 3 hours before the race. So we were like stalking around, like gnawing on the blades and stuff. And so, anyway, but it did work. We won that race quite comfortably in the end. And but I don't know whether this had, I if I'm being really honest, I think that Aussie was just a bit quicker. But also there's that, I think, slightly shot your bolt a little bit early. Maybe, England in the Rugby World Cup in 2019, against, smash the All Blacks and then come up short against South Africa in the final. There's that can happen.
Really hard to have the
really
once in a lifetime
we
race.
were so up for that race. Yeah. We were so up for it. But yeah, that was we came up short in that final.
That's another thing I think, though. You're talking about the mentality, like the underdog mentality being good and bad.
Yeah.
I think that kind of like pain is good mentality is good to a point, but then you get to the point where you kind of break that safety switch in your head, and then you're like, well, I can now break myself on any yoga, but like, is that?
Well, yeah, and so you have to get away from that mindset when you're doing like zone-based training and stuff like that.
Yeah, because then I was just like, weird.
Well, 100%, and it was definitely like a period. Leander, I don't know where this came from. Is like, well, we're not going to do UT2 anymore. We're just going to you're going to have a split, and you have to do that rate for that split for as long as you can. And for lightweights, it was 152 at rate 18. Oof. It was basically do 152 rate 18 for as long as you can. We'll do it in sets of 6K, and the aim is to get to 18K. I think the best I ever got was 11K. I did 6, had my minute and a half break, and I did 5K of the next six, and
but you're not at like 145 heart rate training zone. Yeah,
I don't know I mean, I think it was probably in that a vein of like, let's just tough. This has kind of gone down this like Brooks route. Let's just toughen people out.
Yeah, which is also
it has its place, right? Everything has its place in balance and moderation, I suppose. It's time and place for everything. So before we went back onto the Henley, I can't even remember where I was going.
Coaching, really, like how you've kind of stepped into coaching.
So got into there, and at the time, Josty was coaching with the girls, and I was coaching the boys. But again, it was the setup there was nothing, and I think he did amazing things to take it, because I when they won Henley. He got the first win with the boys. I forget what year it was, and I messaged him to say like that. Mate, that is seriously impressive from where things were. Like, because unless you were in it, you didn't know the challenges. It's hard enough to win when you're in a setup that's got history and backing, and didn't have any of that. And there's a lot that had to happen, the changes within the school. I think you had to play a long game, make change over time, not upset the apple cart, all that kind of stuff, and. It was
buy donuts for all the teachers and play the game.
I've yet to sit down and actually find out all the deep and dark secrets of how he managed it, but he certainly managed. Had the patience I didn't have. There's a lot of things I didn't handle very well, I think, when I was coaching there, and but I that was a sort of part-time thing. And then in when I was, so this would have been about 2009. 2008, late 2008, I wasn't very happy because of some of the stuff that was happening there. I still remember being on a trailer at Dorney Car Park on a classic, like things were frozen or flooded or something when we were training down there. And Dave Curry was there, he was coaching Bordeaux at the time, and he said, "Oh yeah, we're taking our kids to a rowing festival in South Africa." I was like, "Oh, cool." He said, "They're looking for a coach. They're looking for a head coach for the school that's hosting it. So that's something you might be interested in." I was like, "Oh, I never really thought about that. I know nothing about the country, never been there before." Long story short, I applied for it, had a Skype interview, got offered the job, and moved to South Africa the following May. That was the next sort of little chapter.
What was it about coaching rowing that attracted you to it, that was different from rowing but still in the same?
To be honest, at the time, I think it was just, this is the logical thing. Because at the time, I was coaching rowing part-time while I was trying to rehab, because when I started coaching, I'll do this while I get myself sorted out. I'll row, I'll get myself sorted out, I'll get back to London, and that'll be it. I'm still going to go to London, all this kind of stuff. And that fades away, but you get more into it, and you start to realise there's things that you enjoy about this, and you want to do it more, and you want to do it better. And a lot of the same patterns and tendencies take hold and take over. And again, I look back and think, actually, I repeated a lot of the same stuff that it just transferred into my coaching.
Yeah. I can be in a high performance environment, but I don't have to put my body on the line anymore.
Yeah, or you just end up moving into that different role. And I think, unlike Tom, he, I think, decided quite early on it was, and he went off and he shadowed coaches, and he went to Australia and did lots of really cool stuff. And I didn't. One thing I look back at, not regret, but which I'd done, but didn't, because I just kind of fell into it. Never did any of that. I basically, all my learning came through trial and error. I never really, it's one thing I would always advise anyone who wants to get into coaching would be to spend time with experienced coaches. And you'll learn some stuff that you don't want to do. I don't want to be like that. That's fine. But you'll learn plenty that you do want to do as well. And I didn't do that.
Why reinvent the wheel, right? But also, I guess going into coaching made sense with like your degree and your academic setup as well.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, and I moved out to South Africa, and I was there for 2 years, and it was phenomenal.
Tell us about it.
So I was coaching a very small, like the school I went there was tiny, like 20, 25 kids per year, and it was co-ed.
Oh, wow.
So tiny school, and obviously only a certain proportion of them row. So their background was really, their sort of way of doing things, as you'd imagine would be, they'd focus on one or a few athletes at a time. So you'd have a good kid in a year and they'd do the single, not much else. Or they'd have a double, and every now and again they'd have a quad or something like that. And that was the history. When I don't know what I thought the ambition would be, but basically we started out, we had 3 under 15s who were very good, but we didn't have 4. So you get them to borrow one from somewhere else to make a crew, or they'd have to row with they're 1 under 16, so they were rowing in the under 16s. And then I had four juniors, one of which was very good, and there was a bit of a sort of drop off after that. oh, we could put them in an 8. And again, we had this other meeting. It's all very political stuff without kind of wanting to bore people on this podcast about it. The South African school setup is very, very school centric in the sense that like there's almost no club rowing out there. There's only 2 or 3 rowing clubs, and they have almost no junior setups. So it's all schools. They don't know how to handle clubs, and we had 2 other small schools in our locality who had kids that wanted to row, but because there was no club set up, they didn't know what to do. So basically, they came and rowed with us. So we operated as a club. School setup didn't like that. But we had this sort of weird setup where I had kids from several schools rowing together. It's created some interesting political stuff going on. And in a meeting about this, one of the people from the school's rowing union said, well, it makes sense that you should just stick with the small boats because of, of course, if you tried to enter rate, you wouldn't even make the top 10. So it's good to focus on the small boats. Of course, this is a bit like what happened to me as a J16. And I was like, right, okay. Anyway, so I thought, so we put these in an 8, and I still remember, I've got the video somewhere of putting them out and saying, we didn't have a boat. So I went, what are we going to do? So we went to the University of Johannesburg, and they had an old boat lying around that they didn't really use, and we sort of patched it up and found some riggers for it and did this and that. And there's a very TIA, this is Africa, find your way, you make a plan, you find a solution because you've never got enough resources for stuff.
Back to the underdog mentality.
Yeah, it's all of that. Anyway, I stuck them out in this boat, and it was awful. And I had this whole they can scull, therefore they can sweep. And I was like, I'm feeling slightly challenged in that mentality. It was terrible. Anyway, they got better. And we went to the school's boat race, which is a bit like it's a cross between the school's head and the boat race. So basically, it's quite a cool format, actually. It's on the Cowley River down on the coast. And you do a head race. So it's based on the boat. So it's 6.4K. And then based on the head race, you have one-on-one races the following day. Ooh. So one race, first race is second, third race is fourth, all the way down, and those one-on-ones happen in reverse order the following day. So the last race of the day is the first versus second from the head race. And in the head race, I think we came 7th out of 20 odd crews. And of course, everyone's gone, what? Because they'd never entered and 3 of them were J15s. And over the next year, the following season, a little bit older, a couple of other kids joined the school, and all of the major events, so imagine sort of equivalent of school's head, Nat schools, other big, they basically in the top 3 at every major event. Bronze at nationals, they got silver at boat race, we were the top school club at every championship in terms of cumulative points. So it was amazing. And one of the things I say is good athletes flatter coaches, right? So I think some of the very best coaching I have seen and come across is the coaching that you see with the guys who look after like J14 groups at some of the public schools. But no one will ever know or see what they do because of the sorts of groups and some of the most rewarding coaching I've ever done has been at some that I've coached at several of the Oxford colleges. Probably I think when I look back and I think, but when you've got good athletes, you get results that people notice. So I coached an athlete who got a medal at the World Championships. She was a phenomenally talented athlete. I don't think that was the hype. I think I've done better coaching than that, but do you feel what I mean? So we had some good athletes in that. And there's also a lot of other people who made things happen in the system and the structure that allowed that to happen. But it was an amazing experience. And then off the back of that, was I 26, 27, got asked to coach the junior provincial team, and several of the athletes that I coached were part of that, and then the junior national team. But before the junior world championships even happened, they realised they didn't have a coach for the under 23 women's team. And I was already coaching a lightweight woman athlete who was trying to transition from under 23s to seniors, and I was doing some one-on-one stuff with her. I was also doing some coaching with the University of Johannesburg, and I was doing boarding house duty, and I was teaching in the school. I was working like 900 hours a week. It was ridiculous, but I was also loving it. And
classic, bro. How many people listening to this are like, yep.
But this is the other thing, you're 26, you're another, and this is also kind of some element of that ADHD stuff. That's just where my brain was at. It's not as a conscious thing. I want to be the best coach ever, because I've always been of the mind. And this is Jez, actually. Jez always said athlete first, rower second, and the athlete comes first. And I've always carried that with me. And one of the things that's always pissed me off in coaching is coaches who make it all about them. I don't want you to take this athlete away from this sport to rowing. Why? Well, because they're our best player. So what? Why should that matter? If an athlete wants, you're there for the athlete's benefit, not the other way around. And everyone will say they believe that, but that's not always borne out in reality. That's always something I really tried to come back to consciously. And look, we all like winning. Don't get me wrong, but it's the development of the people, I think, that is the most rewarding bit. But yeah, so this like this hyper focus on it, and so the Roger Barrett, who's the head coach of the South African national team at the time, phoned me up and said, "Do you want to coach the under-23 women
as well?"
Well, no, instead of doing the juniors.
Okay.
Yeah, because and I was like, yeah, great. Like, but this was a slightly surreal experience because a couple of years before, like because while I was at Clare's Court, I did some coaching with the junior girls group, high performance junior girls at Maidenhead, who had some really good athletes. And again, I don't think I did anything special. They did well. They were already doing well. They had been well coached as younger juniors. So, do you know what I mean? You inherit this group and
don't mess it up.
Yeah. Basically, you inherit a group that already know how to row well. They're basically doing the program that's set up by the junior chief coach. Kind of trying to keep them on the straight and narrow kind of thing. And that's about it. And they did well, but so I go to the trials when I was in the GB system, because there's so many athletes and so many coaches, you've got to do your time. You know, if you do your time, you've got some good athletes, you might coach the home countries, you might coach the Coop, coach the junior worlds, you kind of work your way up and you work your way through. And with South Africa, it's not like that. There's such a tiny sport, so there's a tiny group of athletes. Most of the coaches out there, most of the people coaching out there, certainly was then, I don't know if it is now, were really young themselves, like, because most of them don't carry on after school. So most of the people coaching the best school crews out there are less than under 25 themselves. You don't have the sort of crop of people who've been coaching for 20, 30 years, coaching the top junior crews. So I think that kind of, that there were just less people doing it. So it just meant, and I suppose I probably benefited from GB's a really good, strong rowing nation. This is a British coach, probably knows what he's talking about. I had some crews that did well, and there was probably an element of that, and I got asked. It just wouldn't happen here. So suddenly I'm at the under-23 world champs, and I saw Chef. I think he was probably like, what the hell are you doing here? He's probably a bit surprised. And I was like, yes, probably a fair question. I'm wondering the same myself.
In full kit. In full to go to South African
kit. Well, probably less that I'm coaching someone else, but more like you were only here yourself as an athlete 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Like, you know, anyway, it was a really cool experience out in Belarus. But just
what year? 09?
2010.
I was there.
Were you there?
Yeah.
One of the medals.
Oh, yeah, it's one of these. That's the sheets.
Oh, wicked.
It's this one.
There you go. Well,
Men's Cox 4.
The Cox 4. Well, I'm assuming it was meant.
Yeah.
It's the world's biggest.
It was, that was mad. That was mad. Now that was like a culture thing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that was a mad place. That was a mad place.
Rowing is just such a small world.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was just such a. And I often talk about like it was this compressed window of going from being feeling like I got a bit of a failed athlete to coaching at the World Championships in 4 years, 5 years. And it was this kind of crash course in teams and people and leadership and systems and having to learn all this stuff about. I had so many mistakes. And I look back at some of the stuff I had the kids doing and I was coaching in South Africa and I shudder. But I got away with this. I had the kind of confidence of youth. I suppose I was so convinced that what I was doing was right. They just
That's
kind of,
half of it.
It's like you're like the Pied Piper. They just kind of follow and just kind of, and if you kind of, as long as it's not too terrible, you kind of, you can get results.
And the British accent definitely helps over in different nations as well.
As you start coaching, no one, like, I've talked about this before, but you know, you have like 30 kids in front of you and you're like, right, today we're going to do this, and this. And you're like, okay. Still no one says anything yet. Does anyone understand what?
I still remember like going around to sort of the guy who kind of basically recruited me was the guy who ran the sort of parents rowing association for the school. And I mean, anyone who coaches in schools here, you think parents get involved in their school sport here? In South Africa, it's a whole other level. Anyway, I went round to there, and his son was sort of the top athlete at the time, and he ended up going to trials and getting selected for South Africa for Junior Worlds, which was really cool. and sitting around their dinner table with him. So he was the boys' captain, the girls' captain, a couple of other parents and athletes. And in later years, they've admitted to me, because I went on and I showed them that the program that I currently was running with the Maidenhead girls, and kind of this is the sort of thing that we might be doing. And I think that was a bit of a shock to them, because it was about 3 times more training than they were doing at the time. And they've said to me in recent years, since I've gone back and visited, and they said, we never thought someone could talk for that long about rowing and rowing training and training zones and all this kind of stuff. But for me, I was obviously really enthusiastic about.
How does it interested? Like, how does it rank in South Africa? Like, as a sport, obviously, like for them, rugby, right?
Tiny.
It's probably a big one. It's
absolutely
because
tiny.
In the rowing world, we kind of think of them as quite a big player. They do really well.
So it's tiny. The numbers are tiny. There is a handful of schools that row. Like, yeah, there's maybe a dozen that have sort of proper rowing history, and there's a smattering of others that kind of come in and out of it. But there is half a dozen universities that row. There's probably a few more that just dabble, but there are half a dozen that row competitively at a decent level, and there is a handful of clubs, but the club rowing is almost exclusively masters stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a bit of masters, quite a bit. There's a handful of clubs that do masters, like, again, half a dozen, maybe a dozen clubs that do masters rowing with the odd junior. There's almost no senior club rowing out there at all.
So what's the population like in comparison to the UK? And just to compare, because in Poland we've got probably about 40 rowing clubs. It's a 40 million person country. Yeah. In Britain, there's like 900 or something on the British rowing website.
I did know this a while back, because I was looking as South Africa's got one of the biggest wealth equality gaps in the world, and someone was asking me about it, so I checked the population. I can't remember.
64 million.
Wow, okay. So
it's not far off the UK, but you've got to remember the vast majority of the country live in massive poverty.
Yeah.
And like a rowing boat's about as far away from anything that they're ever going to get. Like there is a very, 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 I mean, rowing's an elitist sport everywhere. And I know that, I mean, this is why I think things like what Fulham Reach are doing is brilliant, because you're trying to break some of those barriers. But the reality is there's high barrier to access, right? It's a costly sport. Whichever way you slice it.
So interesting.
So you've got this massive barrier. It's a very small, so it's a tiny. It's one of the things I talk about when we talk about systems and how systems need to make best use of the resources available. So the British system,
it doesn't need to.
Well, the British system is designed based on the fact that it's got a high number of athletes, it's got resources. So it's a volume-based system. Do more training, train harder but it's pretty much, people are going to hate me saying this probably, but pretty much train harder than everybody else, because you've got enough talented athletes. So if your training program is hard enough and your athletes are talented enough, you can basically have this kind of system, that structure that people feed into it, and your outputs are the end. But South Africa can't have that system. Yeah. So the under 23s when I was there, so I coached someone called Kirsten McCann, who she got a bronze medal, which at the time was the first women's rowing medal for South Africa. Phenomenally talented athlete. She went on to win a gold medal in the senior worlds and raced in 2 Olympics, maybe the A final and the lightweight double in 2 Olympics. Really, really talented athlete. Like I say, good athletes, flatter coaches. I coached a pair, Kate Krusovitz and Claire Louise Bodie. Again, also phenomenally, brilliantly physiologically gifted athletes. Came 4th in the pair. Would have won a medal if they'd had a full season of training, but various reasons had conspired against them, which meant they hadn't trained a full season. But the men's pair, who I didn't coach, were coached by Andrew Grant. They got gold that year, and that was Lawrence Britton and John Smith. So John, or Bean, as people will know in South Africa, won gold in London, and then in the lightweight 4, and he also won the lightweight double with James Thompson. I forget what year they broke the world record. I think it was in Amsterdam. I forget what year it was.
2014 was Amsterdam Senior Worlds, yeah?
Senior Worlds.
Yeah, Amsterdam 2014.
Phenomenal.
Of course it was on the ball span.
Phenomenal lightweight athlete, but a lightweight.
Yeah.
And Lawrence, who some people will know of because of his sort of journey through cancer and getting through a cancer diagnosis, cancer treatment, coming out the side and still being a phenomenal athlete. And but at the time, as under 23, so you had Lawrence, who's a heavyweight, but not I often say, like, if either of them had been put into the GB talent identification heavyweight, neither of them would have got picked.
Yeah.
John because he's too lean, and his legs are too slow, and John and Lawrence because he's too short, and but
The Sinkoviches wouldn't be identified in the British system either. They're too short.
Really?
Yeah.
So it is a classic thing, and also some one's like 8 inches taller than the other, but 20 kilos lighter.
Mm-hmm.
But that pair, they just made it move, and they got a gold medal. And basically, the way the system, well, I mean, there was an element, of course, you still have to have a certain element of standardization in a rowing system, but the way the system structure worked was, how do we look after these individual athletes the best we can? Because this is what we got.
Yeah. We spoke to...
We don't have anyone else. There is no one else to fill the breach if something happens. And that now in a system where you've got hundreds of athletes all competing for those spaces, you can't because there's too many.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you have to have a system that can cope with that number of athletes. And there are pros and cons to both of these. So it's not me saying one system's better than the other. It's saying it's a system set up for what you have, the resources you have, the athletes you have, whatever, the finance you have, all those other things.
It's similar in Poland in terms of the limited amount of athletes, and sort of athletes aren't as disposable per se. So you have to,
as well.
Yeah, you have to like really care about their longevity. So yeah, Emma was talking about that even in the New Zealand system.
New Zealand team. I was like fascinated. Like, how does a country so small perform so well?
Really well.
And to the point where she talked about there were certain, say like a UT2 bike session where the older athletes would maybe be doing a 4-hour UT2 session, and the brand new athletes would be doing an hour. And it's like, because you're physiologically in a very different place, and I need to be doing more of this, and
it's a really hard thing with rowing to get that balance right between standardization and individualization for lots of different reasons. But yeah, it's just structured differently. But talk about punching above the weight. So we turned up with 5 athletes and 3 a sport team of 3, so sort of a great athlete to support ratio. So AJ was coaching the men's pair, and myself was looking after the women's boats, and then we had a physio as well, Nicola, and that was it. And
TV probably would have had like 50 athletes.
I don't know, but we were sharing the team with the Americans, and the Americans had a team, had a crew in every event. I don't know how many had 70 athletes, or a team of 90 or something like that. They take up most of the hotel, and we've got like a handful of rooms. And anyway, we finished joint on the medal table with them. This was the butt of the conversation on the sort of night after the racing finishes, that we joined 7th on the medal table with the Americans who'd had a boat in it's also the only time I've ever seen a wooden boat at the World Championships.
Yes, we got a photo with it.
So of course they would have been in your event as well.
Yeah. And if they'd been in the others,
they beat the Americans.
They beat the Americans, but if they'd been in the other semi, they would have made the A final as well. Their time, their losing time in their semi would have gotten them through. Yeah, imagine this, a wooden varnished Cox 4 with World Rowing stickers on it.
There wasn't a stern loader as well.
I think it might have been,
It was a wooden stern loading Cox 4, and I remember seeing them paddling around and thinking, why are the club rowers rowing around while we've got championships on? And the next thing, I see them come down the course like ahead of this American crew. I'm like, well, there you go, teacher. What do I know?
We didn't get to race against them, but we went, I wish I knew who had the photo. I think Ben Lewis maybe had it, but there's a photo of us because we were just like, we're not leaving that. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And one of the other things that World Championships taught me as a coach was not to judge crews on first appearances in terms of how quick they're going to be. So I remember watching we knew the Romanian pair were going to be quick because they won the previous year and they were massive, and you could see it in the way they rowed. I saw the American pair rowing past, and they were tall. I thought, they look pretty ropey. Anyway, they won. I think they won. I can't remember if they won and the Rangers kept. But anyway, they were seriously quick, and it just. But then when you stop and you look at the connection and the acceleration on the boat when the blades are in, and you kind of you stop and take and it's one of these. This is another jazzism. Rowing's not a dressage event.
Dressage, yeah. That's in my head. That's literally in my head.
You don't get points for looking pretty. It's about going from A to B as fast as possible.
Yeah. And you can freak yourself out because a crew will row past and be like, yeah, that looks good. Like at paddling. And so what?
And actually, a lot of the coaches, I think, in the school scene in South Africa, I think sometimes looked at the crews I was coaching, and sort of, I remember one saying, why are they, kind of not only understanding why they were quick. I think because the blade work was a bit ropey and there were bits and pieces like, but when the blades were, hopefully, when the blades in the water, they're doing what they should be doing.
Did you also see that? Did you see the Italian 8 that got left out in the rainstorm?
What, in Belarus?
In Belarus. The Italians left
right way up and got filled with water.
Yeah, it got fully filled with water, and it bananas. It didn't quite snap, but it basically
vague memory.
The bow and the stern were 4 foot higher than the middle of the boat.
But it was very entertaining last night there, but I don't think that can be shared on the podcast.
We'll talk about that later.
It was just quite surreal, I suppose, kind of being in that environment and learning on the job. And it's just this 5-year period where I was 1 minute I'm coaching beginners J14, and then coaching at the World Championships, and then the following season, so that was 2010, and then the following season I made it. I was sort of faced with a bit of a quandary. It was the potential, I think, that was of staying on and being more involved with the South African national side alongside the school stuff, or moving back to the UK. It became that sort of, am I sticking here for the long haul? I ended up moving back to the UK in 2011, and but that changed my life in another way as well, because I'd met Ellie, who would become my wife while I was out there. She's British by birth, but grew up in the UK. I grew up in South Africa, and we got together a month before I moved back, so we did a year of long distance, and a year later she moved over here. And we just had our 9th anniversary, so
congratulations.
So that was a very formative couple of years in many ways. And I've said this to lots of people I coached while I was over there, and I wonder if sometimes they think I'm being a bit dry. I say I genuinely think I took far more out of those 2 years than the people I coached. Like it was life changing. And again, a bit like that kind of, I think you can exist as a coach in the GB, in the British throwing scene, and question whether you're good enough or whether you can cut it at a certain level and all this kind of stuff. And I came back realizing that actually, not to judge coaches, athletes, but I also learned about coaches based on the level that, like, what you see. It's that kind of, there's lots of brilliant coaches who you might never notice, on just because they're not coaching athletes who are at that level, or plenty of people who are coaching at a high level who have really good athletes. And to sort of try and just be a bit less, to judge a bit less, I suppose. And that's the thing, is like, as I've gone through life, I advocate more and more for curiosity, and try to be curious and try to understand rather than judge too quick, because we all do. Because you don't know the story, I suppose.
It's the curious minds that learn the most, and they tend to have the most interesting, adventurous experiences in life, because that's where curiosity leads you.
100%. It's probably the thing I advocate for the most.
Yeah.
But yeah, I came back and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And actually I had this conversation with Jez about the kind of performance coaching stuff more generally, because one of the things that I talk about this a lot in the training that I do is, there are lots of different components to performance, but if we took it like something like technical skill, right? And anyone listening to this will know you need a certain amount of technical skill in rowing, right? So if you don't have the skill, you get in the boat, you fall out, okay, you get a bit better, and you can row. But then let's say I can train a person or a crew to be technically really skilled, and I can give them a training program so we maximize their physiology, make them really fit and strong. What that does is that raises the ceiling of potential. It gives us the potential for high performance, but what it doesn't give us is consistency of performance. So what gives us consistency of performance? And of course, as a coach, you end up being interested in what gives us consistency of performance. And eventually you realize it's things like how people manage pressure. So why is it sometimes when the pressure's on, people fold, and sometimes they produce their best? What can you do about it? Why do some teams gel and some don't? What can you do about it? There's some Jezisms in here about the mood hoovers in the boat.
The mood hoovers?
Mood hoovers in a boat, yeah.
Tell us.
Like, sometimes you put the 8 best people in a boat together and it doesn't work. And sometimes it's because there are individuals or an individual in the boat that's a mood hoover and it just sucks everyone else down.
Okay.
And in business, I talk about like brilliant jerks, people who are tolerated because they're brilliant, but they bring the overall performance down. So let's say you put an athlete in the boat and they're 20% better than the person they replaced, but they bring everyone else's performance down by 10%. So the boat overall goes slower, even though they're a better athlete.
I've always thought,
and that gets tolerated because on paper, objectively, they're a better athlete. But you get some athletes that, in John Wooden, the famous basketball coach, called them glue athletes that glue the team together, so that they may not be
Fosters.
100%.
Yeah,
a good example of that. People that on paper aren't the best athletes, they're good enough, right? So that they have to meet a minimum bar in certain ways to be in there, but they bring out the best in those around them. So looking at things like, why do some teams gel and some don't? What can you do about it? What are the things that affect the physical and mental condition people arrive at training or racing in? And what can you do about it? And then the systems and structures you put around people. Now, I didn't have the language of human factors back then, but basically that's the study of this. What internally, interpersonally, and externally affects people's performance and their well-being. What, of course, as a coach, and I'd be interested, I don't know if people kind of write in or comment on this stuff, other coaches and their observations, whether they agree or disagree with this. I found I spend about 80% of my time working on stuff that had absolutely nothing to do with rowing.
Yeah.
We hear that all the time.
Honestly, because you have to do the specific stuff, you have to do the technical stuff, but I don't think I was a particularly good technical coach. I don't think I knew that much about training programs. I'd learned bits and pieces, but I hope I found a bit of a niche in kind of working all the other stuff, trying to bring the best out in people as people. And I suppose, so inevitably you get into a place where you think, well, working with rowers in a private school is a pretty small niche element of the population you could be working with. So could I be doing this stuff with a wider group? So I came back, had these conversations with Jez, thought about how to do this and ending up bottling it and deciding to go and get a coaching job. So I got the job as director of rowing at Monkton Combe down in Bath. And I think it's the only time I've ever been fired from a job. And it's something I've never really talked about publicly.
Do you want to?
Yeah. I was technically fired. My contract wasn't renewed. I was given a short-term contract. Basically, they had a director of rowing who left partway through academic year. So I was given the contract to the end of the contract. And of course, with the basis that, assuming nothing goes wrong, it'll be extended, and it wasn't. And now the performance of that crew were the best they'd been of the club as a whole. And I'm not going to go into opinions and conjecture about why I think things happen, but I think, not managing the internal politics of the school very well. And I think, ironically, unfortunately, I think I'd turned the corner and had figured that out, and it was heading in the right direction. But I think that decision got made. I have opinions about what other things I think may or may not have been going on in the background that may have contributed, but in the end, it ended up being the best thing that could have happened, because I think in reality, I was only doing that job because it was the safe thing to do.
Yeah.
So maybe they've done you a favour, yeah.
It's the old Jim Carrey quote.
It forced me down a different route.
You can fail at what you don't want, so you may as well have a go at what you do want.
Yeah, and I suppose I still remember having a conversation with, I think I'd say this because the person in question is not there and isn't involved with the school in any way anymore, having a conversation with the headmaster at the time, saying, I'm really concerned. Anyone knows me, I'm not backward in coming forward with my opinions about stuff. And I said, I'm really worried, I think, because they were going down the line of, I fought really hard in South Africa against a few things, and one of which was the whole coming out to exams, could have to stop training or back off the training and all this kind of stuff. And I said, I've actually looked at it. That's not backed up by the research.
Mm-hmm.
I know Ryan Domains looked at this at Headington, found that actually not only do rowers tend to do better overall, but actually we know that it's really important they carry on the training. If kids are used to a certain amount of exercise, don't change it. Don't change anything.
Was that Ryan that came up with that? Because we were told that at Newcastle University as well. They were like, don't quit rowing.
He studied that within the...
Because he loves the data, and we had this conversation with him, and I think we mentioned
he probably had the data at his fingertips. I don't have it at my fingertips. I've seen it.
He's a spreadsheet master.
He went to the headmaster with the facts and was like, not only can I tell you they shouldn't do, what I can do here is prove, here's all the people that did that and got worse, and here's all the people that didn't do that and got better.
So there was some research from several universities who'd actually researched this stuff. So because a parent complained about it particularly, so I thought, well, I need to arm myself, so I'm going to actually get all the data here and actually emailed the person who did the research, and they emailed me back, and they were like, oh yeah, I can tell you more about all of this and how we did the study and all this kind of stuff.
That's cool.
So anyway, I kind of managed to kind of convince the powers that be that it was a good thing for them to carry on. And sure enough, it was all fine. It was all fine, but I didn't manage to break through that barrier, and I managed to. And they were doing stuff like had kids going to trials, but trials was in half term, and I said, I'll hang around during half term. I'm not going to go home. The kids are both local. I'm going to come down so they can go out in their pair a couple of times over half term before trials. No, you can't do that. The kids need time off. So, but they're going to trials. oh, well, I have to go and train at a club. I was like, so and it's this sort of very rigid mindset about, and I actually get what they were trying to say, that kids need time off from school and stuff. So they're not trying to make life difficult. They're just, their mindset around what's necessary. I talked about being realistic, courageous in your ambitions, but realistic about what it'll take to get there.
And I think that comes a little bit down to a certain point. You don't expect someone who's to understand something that they're not capable of doing. We're talking about performing at a super high level. You may not be capable of understanding what it requires. What seems
obvious to you isn't obvious to someone else.
Yeah.
Someone they're just thinking about the educational needs of children. In their mind, you're putting too much pressure on them, and I get that.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm saying, these kids want to go to GB trials. They want to do as well as they possibly can at that trial. They know they need to keep training every day, and they need to go out in their pair at least a couple of times in the week leading up to trials. I'll hang around. We can do that. Well, so they ended up going down to Bradford-on-Avon Rowing Club and rowing in a pair that they'd never rowed in before, and it was obviously, these things are not helpful.
Probably knocked their confidence, if anything.
So, and I remember having a conversation with the headmaster, and I said, one of the things I'm really concerned about is that we're managing their lives for them. We're not putting them in situations where they have to learn how to manage their time themselves. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, for £30,000 a year, I think you'll find the parents expect us to manage their lives for them.
Then you're like, well, I'm fighting a losing battle here, because we're not.
But do you know what? One of the other things I remember thinking is, I'm glad I'm not doing your job. I actually walked out of there with much more sympathy for some of the conflicts, because I remember thinking, well, another way I don't know why I ended up thinking that. I think £30,000 a year, that's like a staff member's salary.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got to play this incredibly difficult game, trying to manage lots of competing priorities and stuff. And I can afford to be idealistic about what I want for the rowing department. But I remember thinking that's a really tough job to try and manage and balance all these difficult things. And he was a rower himself in the background. So I think he's probably thinking, I don't want to make it look like I'm biasing towards. And there's just so many things pointed towards. And as much as it's difficult emotionally when someone says to you, we don't want you to carry on doing the job, I also knew deep down that was because I think probably would have hit a cap on going smoothly. I might just carry on doing it.
It's also difficult. I've certainly also been in situations where I'm like, oh, I'm trying to provide a high performance program here to an organization that isn't really interested in it.
No,
with a bunch of athletes that aren't really buying into it.
Well, it's hard because the athletes are getting conflicted messages.
Yeah.
Because the school's saying we want to be the top rowing school in the southwest of England. That was their stated objective.
But they're not letting
And I'm saying, okay, well, this is the training and it's necessary to get these athletes to that level. Oh, well, that's too much training. Yeah. But
I hate that. I don't hire a builder to build my house and then tell him how to build my house.
It was a lot of that. And I think I left with a lot of ill feeling and judgment, but I look back with a lot more curiosity. And one of the big things we talk about in human factors is people do what makes sense to them at the time. The way those people were approaching, their attitude to me made sense. And I have no doubt that those people in those educational roles had the best of intent towards the school and the kids. And it's just different ways of seeing things. So it just wasn't helping me. So I just went out and I spent a few years kind of going, what do I want to do? Do I want to do one-to-one coaching, kind of performance coaching, life coaching, that kind of stuff? Do I want to work with schools? Do I want to work with sports teams? What do I want to do? And I basically spent this time not sure, living on a credit card. My wife, girlfriend at the time, paying the rent while I tried to figure out. So she's a physio, and fortunately was working in private practice at the time, so I had enough money to pay the rent and figuring it out. And I did a few bits and pieces, did a bit of corporate work, did some coaching, and I happened to get an opportunity to do some work with a guy who ran a business doing training in human factors, and I knew of him because my stepdad worked with him as well, and doing human factors training in healthcare. And my stepdad told him about some of the stuff I'd done and some of the sort of training stuff I'd written about communication and performance and all this kind of stuff. And he said, it'd be interesting to bring you with your sort of high performance sport background into the team, because this guy came from an aviation background. Mm-hmm. So in aviation, they do look a lot at all the different factors that influence safety in particular. And they came from that background, trying to transfer into healthcare. And I worked, and it was suddenly this new world that I'm in and learning a new language. But a lot of the stuff, I remember a lot of the stuff that they were teaching was sort of often actually slightly outdated versions of stuff I'd already learned through sports psychology and like stress arousal stuff. A lot of the stuff they were teaching, I was like, that's about 30 years out of date. Still teaching the X-Dodson curve rather than the, catastrophe theory and kind of the stuff I'd learned. I thought I can bring this in and, just found a lot of the experiences I had useful to draw on and worked with them for a few years and had this amazing experience. I still remember doing some observation because sometimes they get us to come in and do observations so we could then help give context in the training that we're doing. And the first time I was 29 coming up to 30, I went down to a hospital in Wales and observed a 4-hour triple bypass heart operation. So having never stepped foot in inside of an operating theatre before, I was like, wow, this is talk about imposter syndrome. Like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm just a running coach. Anyways, that was a really interesting experience. And I do remember, so the guy who was with me, he was an ex, British Airways training captain, has done loads of the kind of crew resource management, teamwork type training for British Airways and all this kind of stuff. And he's 60 odd and sort of got kudos. I'm this kind of kid, and the surgeon's basically barely acknowledging my presence. And then some the guy I was with mentioned that I'd rode for Great Britain. Suddenly, the surgeon wanted to be my best friend. Turned out his kids went to the Grange school up there, and they both rode. So suddenly, he's super interested. It's all right, okay, that's just the way the world works, isn't it? Yeah. You just got to lean on stuff to kind of the fact that I rode for Great Britain has absolutely nothing to do with me being any good at doing that stuff. But people people often find it interesting. So so that was and I worked for them for a few years, and then for a few reasons went independently and set up my own company doing that work, MedLed, which I've been running since late 2017, and now have an amazing team of people. So when I started out, it was basically I wrote the courses, ran the courses, did all the admin, did everything. You guys know that well, and then. It's grown since then, and now we've got a team of trainers and operations manager, and sort of it's a bit of a bigger beast than it used to be. About half our team have clinical backgrounds, different types of healthcare, and then half have non-clinical backgrounds, so people from aviation, military, fire service, various different places really. One of the guys used to sell clipper yachts, America's Cup stuff, and so people who've experienced teams and high performance and safety risk industries from different lenses, and that's so it's a very interesting complex world that we work in now in healthcare.
Sometimes sport in general is like safe war, right? You go into war but there's no, and especially in rowing, there is no safety jeopardy aspect to it, and that's one of racing.
And that's one of the things one of the things we talk about, so what an issue we've got in risk industries is that the learning is usually very outcome based. So essentially, most of the focus is on when things go wrong.
Yeah.
So there's a plane crash or a train derailment or a patient dies in operating theatre who shouldn't, or you've operated on the wrong limb or something.
Oh, God.
Something happens, It's just terrify people for going to hospital. Then we investigate what are the contributory factors to that. And that obviously is important, but you're missing most of what goes on in the system.
There's the thing with the airplanes, the survivor bias or the returner bias. They were looking at the planes that got back where they'd been shot.
You're talking about that one.
So they were armouring where they'd been shot, but ignoring the fact that it was the other bits that were
so the planes that were returning. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the planes that they weren't studying the planes that return. The planes that returned are the ones who didn't get.
Can we hear the full anecdote if someone hasn't heard it?
No. So basically, in the Second World War, they were trying to work out how to armour the bombers to prevent them being shot down. And so what they were doing is, when planes got back, they were looking at where they were shot and armouring the bits where they were shot, and it didn't work. And then, of course, someone worked out and said, but these are the planes that came back. So clearly getting shot in these bits isn't terminal. What about the planes that aren't coming back? It's probably the bits that aren't coming back with holes in that are really important, because it's probably these bits that when they get hit, means the planes don't come home.
Yeah. So in the same way, if you just focus on when things go wrong, you don't necessarily fix the problem. And
Yeah,
I love that.
So basically, like in sport, and one of the things that my observation is whenever I've talked to or seen any of the most consistently successful teams, athletes or coaches, one thing they all have in common is a relentless attitude to improvement. Right? They have this insatiable desire to get better. And importantly, they have an attitude to improvement that's independent of outcome. So they don't wait. No, it's not. No, I don't mean it's about process. I mean, they don't wait for the exceptional to happen. They don't wait till they have a really good day or a really bad day. They have this insatiable appetite for learning all the time. So it doesn't matter whether their performance on any given day, whether it's training or racing, was good, bad, or indifferent. They're always like, what can I learn from that? What went well, what didn't go well? How do I get better next time? Do you know what I mean? So naturally, if it's a really good day, there's probably going to be more bad stuff to pull out of that than good stuff. But there might also still be some good stuff. Equally, if they have a really good day, there's probably going to be more. What can I carry on doing more of? Why did that work? Can I do more of it? But there might still be a few things you can tweak. And if it's an indifferent day, you might be, but it doesn't really matter. And one of the things that's been debunked, people say you learn 3 times more from failure than success. That's also bollocks. Like, there's no evidence to back that up. Actually, you learn based on your attitude for learning. You learn if you look for it. You can learn just as much from success as you can from failure, right? So, but it makes a nice anecdote. You learn more from failure than success. It's just we're drawn to failure more.
Feel nicer.
We're just drawn to failure more. It's a survival mechanism, right? The brain's pre-programmed to scan for danger, so we tend to not see things if they're working normally.
Right. Yeah.
We're primed to notice the exceptional, particularly the exceptionally bad. So in sport you can, because if you have a bad race, nobody dies. If you had a bad match, nobody dies. You can have that attitude to improvement that's independent of outcome. But because in risk industries, healthcare, aviation, rail, nuclear, something like that, when things go wrong, the impact on people is life and death. You'll always have a disproportionate amount of effort and energy going into the study when things go wrong. But one of the things we're trying to do is rebalance it to some extent and encourage people to also look at the normal everyday. What are the things that, and offer the little workarounds where people aren't quite following the process? Why aren't they? Is your process not well designed, or is the situations where it doesn't work, that kind of thing?
Is it not explained maybe very well to them, so they then see the point of the process?
Yeah, or it can be. Yeah, it could be lots of reasons for that. Or when things go really well, do we study that? And I think that's human nature. We often don't. And the other reason that matters is because if the only time people, particularly more senior people, take an interest in your work is when things go wrong, when that person, and in the NHS you'll have people in like what they call quality and safety roles. So someone from the quality and safety team wants to come and talk to you about something that happened. Is that moment of dread. You get an email from that person in that department. You're like, oh God, what's happened? Whereas if they ask you stuff about your work when things go well, it becomes a less threatening conversation. So it has big impact on morale. So
there's that thing of are you trying to win or are you trying not to lose?
Oh yes, I talk about that. I talk about that a lot. Actually, there's some really good, there's some really interesting research with football penalties on that. So, what do you reckon the success rate is in low jeopardy? So low jeopardy would just be it's a penalty, so it matters, but it's in open play. Yeah. What do you reckon the success rate is?
No, I reckon
this is in professional game. So this was meta-analysis of across the, I can't remember how many years and years of professional game, the men's game in particular. But what do you reckon the success rate is at professional level?
79%.
Yeah, pretty high.
85%.
Yeah.
Right. So 85% is your baseline, right? So I mean, low jeopardy is a relative term. For you and I to step out there to take a penalty in front of 30,000 people would be terrifying, but to a professional footballer, it's quite normal.
Yeah.
When it's a shot to win the game, so let's say it's the World Cup final, your team have scored several in a row and the other team have missed 2. So if you score, your team has won. It's over. What do you think the success rate is?
The joystick is like vibrating as you go and take the penalty.
So 50-50?
30%.
93%.
No, I don't.
When it's a shot to win the game, right? Think about it for a moment. Let's say, they score, you score, they score, you score. Now your team has scored 2 in a row and they've missed 2 in a row. So if you miss, it's bad, but your team still has another opportunity to win the game, right? So it's not terminal. Okay, so it's a shot to win the game. When it's a shot to win.
Yeah. But you.
So you have this opportunity. So that the jeopardy is high, But the push, the pressure, the motivation is that this is an opportunity to win,
not to not lose.
right?
Okay.
So that's 93%. What about when it's a shot not to lose? And this is what happened to Bukayo Saka.
Yeah,
If
that
you
did.
remember,
Yeah.
right, against Italy, where it's actually your team that's missed a couple now,
Yeah.
and you know that if you score, that's good, but your team still has to score again to win.
Yeah.
But if you miss, that's it, it's over, you're out, you're done,
yeah.
you've lost. Do you know what the success rate
Below 50, isn't it?
63%.
Okay.
So my point is, there's a 30% swing.
Yeah.
Shot to win, 93%. Shot not to lose, 63%. Aaron Shearer even said, I remember watching that match, and Alan Shearer sat there in the commentary box saying, yeah, it's so much harder when it's a shot not to lose rather than a shot to win the game.
Yeah.
Like, anecdotally, players know
Yeah.
that that's much harder, and actually the research bears that out. So because of the narrative that coaches give, and that's why you'll notice, I think, particularly more recently, coaches are very quick to give a narrative about, the journalists will say something like, oh yeah, so this is a must-win game, isn't it? And they'll say something like, oh yeah, we're really excited about the opportunity. And it comes across sometimes as a bit of a trite thing, but there's a reason. There's actually a good reason why they do that.
Yeah.
Because it's backed up like, let's get excited about the opportunity rather than focus on, we've got to win this game.
Yeah. I always find it interesting.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I also find it interesting in terms of psychologically. I probably maybe even spoke about this with Jez. One that is backed by so much data is the boat race, right? If you are second through Hammersmith, you are statistically this much. If you're second through Barnes, you've got a 95%.
Yeah.
So how in your head in second place through Barnes, knowing what you know about the statistics, how do you do something about that? And it's the same with that penalty thing. Even if you know there's a 30-point swing, how do you get past it?
Yeah, and that's hence why sports psychologists will always have jobs.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the sort of thing. Is how do you change that? It was really. I listened to. So interestingly, so when I was doing my degree, my sports psychology lecturer, she was doing a PhD, and her PhD supervisor was Chris Shambrook.
Okay.
He wasn't involved in rowing at the time; he was involved in football.
Is that the monkey cage?
No, that's Steve Peters.
The
Jim Paradox thing.
Yeah.
But that's kind of interesting stuff. No, he was the GB rowing team psychologist for, I forget how many Olympic cycles he did. And I actually, he spoke at a conference where I was at 5 or 6 years ago, and he was talking about some of the research they'd done with the GB team at the time. And again, I don't know which cycle they did the research in, and it was looking about athletes' relationship with nerves, like whether your relationship with nerves was negative or neutral or positive, i.e., like, and again, if Chris hears this and he can maybe correct me if I hope I'm not misrepresenting your research. I'm really good at remembering the big picture. This again, how my brain works. I'm really good at remembering like the top line message, not
the rest.
This is why my wife will always say where was that? And you got that detail of that story wrong. I was like, doesn't matter. That detail doesn't change the overall message.
Yeah.
But the detail. Basically, if your relationship with nerves was one of, I need strategies to reduce my nerves, i.e. nerves are bad, those athletes tended to do less well when the pressure was really on. Whereas if it was neutral, i.e., nerves, that's my body getting ready to perform.
Mm-hmm.
So notice them, because we know that if you try and ignore them, just repress them, that has unintended consequences.
It's amplifying almost, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll pop out at the most unexpected and fortunate times. Then, or positive, which was, nerves. Right, okay, I'm getting nervous. That's normal. If I'm getting nervous, everyone else is getting nervous.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not getting nervous, it means they don't care as much as I do, so they won't push themselves as much as I will. And if they're getting nervous, I'm getting nervous, they're getting nervous. How can I harness these nerves? This is my body getting ready to perform. This is my body getting adrenaline. This is going to really help me. And it sounds very simple, but it's simple but difficult. So that I suppose the work that an athlete has to do is how do you program the right patterns?
So
because a lot of us all instinctively, without realizing it, be in that either ignore and avoid, or in that kind of I need to find ways to reduce them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was so I'll often say that's one of the nuances of the relationship between stress and performance.
So one thing that really helped me understand that barrier is between nerves and how to navigate them was just understanding that it's my perception of the emotion that I'm feeling. Because I'm not sure if that's right, but being nervous and being excited under the hood is the same thing. So if you just feel nervous and you're like, oh yeah, I'm really excited.
Framing is it, and also I love the phrase your perception is your reality.
Yeah, big time.
like your perception is all you have. So it's all very well. Don't be nervous. You shouldn't be nervous. Like you'll be fine.
Just calm down.
Just speak up. Because our perceptions is our reality. I talk about that a lot because one of the things we look at a lot in the world work is like, why do things make sense at the time? What we're trying to do is get away from a blame culture typically in the media, because the media love to pin it somewhere and something, and we all like a simple answer to a complex problem, particularly certain aspects of the media. But there we go. I won't get into that. But when you say, doctor makes mistake, nurse gives wrong medication, and it can make a juicy story out of it, whereas it's never that simple.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of contributory factors that have gone into, because people rarely set out to make mistakes, and people are rarely incompetent. By say technical skill, yes, it can sometimes be lacking, but it's rarely the defining factor. And people don't generally set out to do a bad job most of the time. I have a series of examples of how this happens, and my slide is called "Good People Doing Their Best." Highly skilled people setting out to do the very best they can, but things going wrong. And one of the examples I put up on the screen is a picture of the 2014 boat race, the Cambridge crab going under Hammersmith Bridge. There's a picture of the guy almost coming out the boat. Yeah, you probably know the picture I'm talking about. Yeah. And so how many hours of training these guys do? One of the questions are, does practice make perfect? And all that kind of stuff. And the other thing I link to that is collective responsibility. How do you think those other people reacted? Do you think they blame that individual? People say, no, they probably got round him. They did, got round him and say, look, that isn't you. We win and lose together and all this kind of stuff. So we're trying to, why do things make sense at the time? And how can we be curious about that? And what are the things within our systems of work that we can change to make it more likely that people perform at their best? Which is ultimately what we all want if we're in that situation ourselves. We're all going to be a patient at some point.
Yeah, that as well, right? We all are going to be in that environment one way or the other.
Probably at a time we don't want to be.
Well, that as well.
But I can't remember where we were before that. So my brain goes off in
talking about emotions, nervousness, perception.
I mean, the one, the big one, Pete Reed is quoting it. I'm not sure it's his, but pressure is a privilege was the one that we talked about a lot. The more you care about something, the more you'll have the feeling of nervousness. But that means you're here because you want to be.
Because you want to be, because you care about it. And you'll never push yourself as far as you possibly can.
Yes.
If you don't care enough.
And if
you can't care and not have.
Yeah. If you're sat here and you don't give a shit, then like, why are you here? Like, you wouldn't be here, wouldn't you? Because you wouldn't care about it.
Yeah.
So
you
again,
need
turn in a perspective.
You need that arousal. One of the things people often quote that kind of inverted U thing with stress and performance. Have you seen it on a?
No.
So imagine you put up, performance and stress on the two axis. So on the, I always have to remember, make sure I get it the right way around. If you put performance up the vertical axis and put stress on the horizontal axis, and people draw this kind of inverted. So a bit of stress helps you, and then you've got like an optimum zone, and then it drops off the other side. Yeah. And of course, that is what happens sometimes, but that's not always what happens. Sometimes your performance goes up to a certain point, and then it carries on.
Yeah.
And it levels out at the level your skill will sustain. Sometimes it does drop off, and you go into that emotionally hijacked state. Fight, flight, or freeze. Yeah. You get that flood of cortisol.
Yeah.
And you can't think, or and you go into one of those sort of binary survival-based responses. And what's the physiology of what's going on? And what are the things that, and basically looking at, again, I'm not very good at data at my fingertips, but the three things that make a difference is our relationship with nerves, our relationship with stress, our perception of our ability to cope, which is massive. So, and one of the things I sometimes do is say, like, let's say your skill, what you're capable of, is an 8 out of 10 in whatever task it is. When a difficulty of a task is 3 out of 10, you're not being pushed. You're not performing at a high level, but you don't have to. Let's say your confidence, your belief in your ability is a 5 out of 10, right? So you can do an 8, but you believe deep down you're a 5. As soon as that difficulty gets to 5, it becomes threatening. So the guy who's researched this, a guy called Sam Vine in Exeter, and he talks about two responses: threat responses and challenge responses. So the challenge response is where you get high levels of adrenaline, but you don't get the cortisol. And that's when you get the excitement, but you don't go into the hijack state, and you don't get all that kind of like resources being taken away from your cognitive functions to attend to your survival and all that kind of stuff. And then the threat response, we get the flood of cortisol and you go into emotional hijacking. So what makes the difference whether you go into challenge or whether you go into threat? And so they're looking at the relationship with nerves or stress themselves, how we frame them. which is kind of what you were saying, then our perception of our ability to cope, and that's basically confidence in a nutshell. So our perception, and it is a little bit bigger than that, because actually, technically speaking, in the research, it's our perception of resources in general.
Yeah.
So your resources is partly your own resources, but it's also there are other resources around you. And some of that is, so confidence and experience. So have I been in this situation and coped before? Do I have other things around me that I believe will help me cope? So our perception of our ability to cope. But self-confidence is a massive thing. So if you think you're a 5, as soon as that gets into a 5, 5.5, what happens is you start to go into the threat state. So what happens is your performance starts to deteriorate. And of course, this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because you underperform as soon as it gets to a 5. So you've just proved to yourself, well, I'm a 5 out of 10. You never get to the level you're actually capable of. That's why in every walk of life, school, sport, everything else, you'll get these like teachers and why they're capable of so much more than they think they are. And that's a lot of this is because feedback generally is given when people do stuff below par. So when I say, when do you give people feedback? They say, well, when they underperform.
Yeah.
How often do you go looking? Are you what I call an appreciative explorer? How often do you go out looking for excellence and give feedback on it? Actually, it requires a lot of work to do that.
Yeah.
So it's a shift in mindset. I need to go looking for when that person or that team does something better than I expected and give feedback, because building confidence is as important as building competence. If you genuinely believe you're an 8 out of 10, now and people always say when I'm doing this in training, what about those people who think they're a 9 and they're actually a 4? It's like, yes, that can happen, and yes, that can be dangerous, but actually that's actually really rare.
Yeah.
The evidence doesn't back up that that's a common issue. What you do see is people who go around acting like they're a 10 out of 10. Now,
we don't actually think.
When you see the people who outwardly, the brash, arrogant, showy, what's usually going on underneath?
Yeah, it's a act.
There's deep insecurity, and actually, your physiology doesn't care about your show. It cares about what you really deeply, truly believe about yourself. So if you'll act like you're a 10, but deep down in your psyche you believe you're a 5, you're still going to get the same pattern repeating. So it's like, as a coach or a supervisor or whatever, actually your challenge when you see the people like that is to try and get through and figure out what's really driving, what does that person really think of? And that's the really difficult bit, because helping people who want to be helped isn't that difficult. It's helping people who don't think they need to be helped at surface level that's difficult.
That is the hardest thing.
That's hard. Yeah. That's really hard. And I don't pretend to. No, I don't pretend to have the experience to be able to tell people how to do that.
But it's really interesting what you say about perception, obviously, because that is really what creates your reality. So a couple of things on stress, really. There's a Russian proverb that says the same boiling water that hardens the egg softens the potato and absorbs the tomato. But it's the same boiling water, but it's just exposed to 3 different things. And then another thing is everyone is going to be stressed at some point.
Yeah.
And the people who believe that stress is bad for them, they have a higher risk of premature death, they go grey quicker, etc. And people who believe stress is good for them actually thrive in that. And they enjoy those stressful situations.
There's a good TED talk on this by a lady called Kelly McGonigal, How to Make Stress Your Friend, which is worth if anyone likes their TED talks and stuff.
And we've talked about this a bit as well. And I think what's made me good at running business and the other things I do is rowing puts you in these high stress environments, so you have to deal with it. And I think what I quite often do when I was coaching, so we had like a really tough erg session, something that I use to help build people's confidence having been stressed, is I'll say at the end of the session, so how many of you at some point during this ergo thought, I can't do this? Everyone puts their hand up. How many of us finished? Everyone puts their hand up. So you will constantly ask yourself that question, but you'll understand that you're capable of doing more than you want. But then you get kind of a funny thing when we talk now, where you start to get to that high stress point. Then you realize you can deal with it. Then you go seek it. And then you get this funny thing when you're like, if I don't think there's a capability of me failing, or if I don't think it's going to push me to a 10, I'm not interested in 3s or 4s or 5s. And then you almost sort of run through a scenario. I could go and do that, and I probably could do it, and it probably wouldn't push me that much. So I'm not even going to do it anymore.
Because performing under pressure, like performing in high stress situations, has a shelf life. So the relationship between stress and well-being is different to the relationship between stress and performance. And that's a thing, that's a kind of a big issue. So if you rely on being stressed to perform all the time, that's the only way I can do it. That is
waiting until the day before you have to hand your paper in.
Now, there is some yes, that is right. Yes, goes on in that. But this is a big problem we have in the NHS at the moment and have had for a long time, but COVID really exacerbated it and we haven't really recovered from that, is we're putting the people are in these really high stress environments and they're performing at a high level, the analogy I often use is you think about pulling out in your car in traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, most people have automatics these days, but we think about manual car. You're sitting on, it's a 60-mile-an-hour road. You're sitting at a T-junction, and there's a gap in cars, but you've got to accelerate quickly to move up. So first gear, red line. Second gear, red line. Third gear, red line. Now you're doing 50, 60 miles an hour. What do you do next? People go, I change into top gear, and I'd let the revs drop, and I go along with the line of traffic. Does your car cope with that? Yeah, of course, absolutely fine. The car's designed to do that. Stress is designed to be in your system to get you away from danger. You're wandering around the savannah, tiger jumps out from behind the bush and you had to run away. And well, that's over in a minute or so. Like, you either get eaten or you get away pretty quick. It's not designed to be in the system for long periods of time. It's very wearing. Like, adrenaline and cortisol are very wearing on the system. So your car copes fine with pulling out in traffic, but if you drive from London to Manchester at 70 miles an hour in third gear, we're going off the rev limiter the whole way, you'll burn your engine out pretty quick.
Oh my God.
So like, this is basically what a lot of environments put people under, and they get away with it because people compensate and they don't say they're struggling, and they don't. It's one of the things I was a little bit uncomfortable with when we were putting all the superhero posters up during COVID. And what it does is it exacerbates what's called superhero culture in healthcare, that we treat people as if they're superhuman in certain roles and they're not.
Yeah.
And that becomes pervasive, and we celebrate the wrong stuff instead of looking after people. And then you have these real problems with burnout.
Interesting.
As people are like working in a broken system and constantly compensating for it.
Is there a way to reverse that when, for example, that your brain is designed to almost like function at its best level when it's almost like wartime? Like in the times of high stress,
the PTSD thing, isn't it?
So basically, there's nothing wrong with kind of performing under pressure and performing under stress, but what we have to do is recognize when we're doing that and see and look at how do we recover from that.
What about inability to perform during times of peace? It's actually
I don't know. I don't know. Depends what do you mean like perform? Like, it depends what are we required to do.
Get your brain interested in doing your work unless the situation is very high stress.
I tell you what, if you figure that, if you know, can you please tell me, because I haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
Honestly, my journey into trying to understand my own brain, my own tendencies, my ADHD, and all the other stuff that goes alongside it, all the other stuff that might be going on is still very much ongoing. And that's a real problem. It's a real struggle I have, is if something's got my attention, it feels easy. So working 100 hours a week when I was in South Africa, I felt driven. Getting up at 6 a.m. when everyone else is still in bed at university to drive from Learning to Leander to go and train didn't feel like too much of it, because I was so focused on the goal. Now, like, there can be some pretty basic stuff that I need to do for work that I know is important, but it can feel like it takes every bit of energy I have in me just to get started on something. And I will find weird and wonderful ways to procrastinate from it. And I constantly surprise myself at how inventive I am.
You'll learn the entire dynasty of Spanish kings or something like all Wikipedia.
Like, I will find things. If you crack that, please let me know.
Well, I think it's all about momentum. Because if you don't drop momentum to zero, it's easier just to keep going, because I guess it's still in your like random access memory and somewhere in your brain. But for me, the most difficult things, I can be so interested in something and I do like 2 or 3 days on it. And then like I have 2 weeks where I can't look at it. Elsewhere I'm doing something else. Getting back up to that task, man.
Can be.
When you lose all momentum, that's when it's like the most difficult.
Yeah, but again, like I did that for a long time and I started refusing to do jobs. It's like, I need a whole day. I need a whole, I want to just wake up and then just dedicate, like, this is how I'm going to be most productive. And then after 2 years of never touching that job, so for me, it was like fixing my car because I want to be locked in.
It's extremes. So,
and then I was like, well, I'd love to be locked in, but I think but the reality is I'm not fucking going to get it. So if I actually want to get somewhere, then I just need to go and do an hour. And if that's not quite as productive as being able to, but I still get there somewhere.
It's extremes as being, it's a bit, I think, if you've been involved in high performance rowing, it is quite an extreme. I think it attracts people who have kind of all or nothing tendencies anyway.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't, I think you can end up moving in that direction. So I think, it's a bit like people who are, I don't know, trying to cut down on that chocolate they eat, and they eat one piece of one bar and they go, that's it, it's ruined, I might as well eat the whole thing. Rather than going, well, nothing's...
That was a good treat, yeah. Back to moderation.
It's like, as my grandmother used to say, everything in moderation except moderation.
It's all about balance. Yeah. This is amazingly interesting, and like you say, so transferable between sport and life, which I think, again, like we said before, maybe a lot of people don't realize some skills that we develop as athletes are incredibly useful in a business environment. And I think you're kind of proof that you've managed to do that in that sense.
Take opportunities when they present themselves. Like, you don't know what's going to be around the corner.
Yeah.
You don't know. I mean, I came back from South Africa and I spoke at, I think it was the Maidenhead Rowing Club annual dinner, so interested in some of the stuff I've been doing in South Africa, and that's one of the things I said, what can I say? What's useful? And that's one thing I'd reflected on, is you just don't know. You never know what opportunities. And it's all about opening doors. I think, so I've always been a big advocate, like, do things in life that will open doors for you. And there's lots of things that will open doors. You know, people say like, oh, academics are everything, or academics don't matter that much. I'm like, I don't really think either of those things are true. They're not everything, but they also open doors.
Yeah.
So does sport. Like, lots of things in life open doors for you. And then the other thing is like being willing to kind of have a look through and have a go and fail fast as well. You've got to be willing to fail. Like, I don't know if this came up in your last podcast, that the Google Hall of Failures. I don't know if you mentioned that.
No.
Like the hall of all the different things, the projects that didn't work. And the reason those are important is if they hadn't been willing to take the risk of failure, they wouldn't have ever got to the thing that worked.
Yeah.
Which they're in the safe space.
Yeah.
What we know, well, the stuff that's easy, people are already doing it. But if it's easy, you'd already be doing it. Like, to kind of move forward and progress, you've got to be risk failure.
The path to success is through failure. Yeah, I remember my wife's Czech, trying to learn Czech. I might have talked about this before as well. But speaking to another couple I know, one of them was Czech, the other one's English. Oh, you're trying to learn some Czech? Yeah, I am. But like, what I want to do is, I'm going to learn it till I can really get it, and then I'll use it. And I just remember, all the light bulb moment on my head being like, what an idiotic. None of us ever. You can't do something without failing. You know, I want to learn how to row, but I never ever want to fall in.
Yeah.
It's not. You're stupid. Like, you might be able to get away with it, but it's not going to be a faster path. But again, like, you take it to the medical aspect, like, when failure isn't an option.
And this is, you say, but it, like, so one of the issues is, often within that context, you've got a lot of people that are driven by perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the bit that can be quite damaging. So no, you don't want to say, take unnecessary risks or risk environment. So risk is an interesting construct to kind of dissect, but even taking a step back from that, what we have to do is destigmatize error, because error will happen and it's normal. And failure in lots of small ways. So people often aren't willing to talk about things they've got wrong. So sometimes people have made mistakes. Now, no harm has occurred to everybody, or maybe it has. They're not willing to talk about it because they feel like they have failed or they are a failure. So destigmatizing that stuff, that doesn't mean people should go and be gung-ho, but within risk, we talk about why, like, risk for the sake of risk, or risk because it's necessary in the moment. Like, some work inherently involves risk, right? So if you want to go and deep sea fishing in the Arctic, there's trawlermen and stuff, or you're in the military and you're in a war zone, that work involves risk. You can't do anything without taking risk. Some work, you can almost avoid it completely. You can design certain types of manufacturing so that there's almost no risk involved in the process. Depends on what sort of work you're doing. So attitude to these things becomes really context specific. One of the reasons healthcare is so interesting is that it's not really one type of work. So often one of the things I talk about is like comparing community psychiatry to orthopedic surgery is like comparing table tennis to basketball.
Yeah.
They're fundamentally different, but we often try and apply the same model.
As a ball. So it's the same thing.
Yeah, and so we apply the same model of what high performance, you see, they don't use high performance language, but in this context, but what does high performance look like? They use the same model of how to get there. So you have to have a different mentality. Rowing is a very simple sport. You can have a pretty simple way of doing things, whereas all sports are really complex. So rowing pretty much follow your process. It's one of the reasons it's nice. It's a repetitive motion. If you practice, if you train hard enough and you keep trying, almost that's what I used to say to people, like pretty much anybody who is able-bodied could get to a point where they could win a medal at nationals. I'm not saying anyone could be a GB Leander. I reckon almost everybody, if you're bloody minded, it's a repetitive motion. You keep trying again and again and again hard enough, anyone can get decent technique. And if you train hard enough, everyone's got a different limit to their physiology, but I am, for example, I'm Mr. Average. Like I can't remember what Pete Reed's lungs are, 10 litres or something, like Matt Pinson's lungs or something.
0.9 or something.
No, bigger than that, aren't they? Yeah. But anyway, we did VO2 max testing at university and my lungs are bang average. I remember being really annoyed and going, how could that be true? I even wrote in my thing after we did it, like, the athlete being tested is a high-performance athlete, so perhaps the test might fall, because is that a personal feeling or is that evidence-based?
Yeah.
But it kind of reminded me, like, you don't know, well, it's able to get to a certain level anyway. And, like, if you're bloody-minded, but some of the, like, sports are complex, so there's that balance between playing to your structure and playing what's in front of you, and coaches will have different views on the balance of those things. And you watch different teams in different sports, and they'll be in slightly different places on that spectrum. But ultimately, there is some kind of balancing act. Some industries can have a fairly homogenous approach to that. Aviation, rail, because the work's pretty much the same no matter what you're doing. But healthcare is hugely varied. There's some stuff you can really control, like a lab. Some stuff you can't control, like when you're out in the community and you're not even in a hospital environment and stuff like that. And you have to have a different approach to how you do things. So making things reliable, making things safe is incredibly difficult. So stuff will go wrong. You will get variation in performance. And the people who cop the blame when that happens are the people doing the work. And that's ultimately at the kind of heart of the work we do, is trying to help give people the mentality and tools to move away from that, to find a different way of working and different way of thinking, so you don't blame the people doing the work. Apart from the odd, yes, you get the odd Harold Shipman type person who does stuff, but they're very, very, very rare. And it's, what about the rest?
Yeah.
But
the way I found a way to do it when coaching rowing was exactly what you're saying. Like, stuff always goes wrong. It just does always go wrong. And when you're on race day and everyone's like, I've spent my whole year, I want to deliver my perfect result, and then something goes wrong and it just throws this. So we used to talk about it, and the week before, whatever day before, it'd be like, right, so tomorrow something's going to go wrong.
How are you going to deal with it?
It's just something's going to go wrong. Like, we know something's going to go wrong and we're ready for it.
And then, so you're verbalizing it, you're just sort of normalizing it before it happens.
You tell them the next day, and then someone's late. And instead of everyone going, but you go, right, here it is.
Told you something would go wrong.
And then they're like, oh yeah, this is the thing. Yeah, we were ready. We prepared for this.
Right.
Even though they haven't prepared for anything, really. Just that perception of being ready for it changed everyone's attitude to problems.
Yeah.
I've got a thing where, for example, if I've got a big day and something needs to happen, and then let's say it happened to me before, I've ordered a burger from McDonald's and then went and tried to eat it, and then it just drops. And I'm just like, well, of all the things that could go wrong today, I'll take that any day. It's a burger, isn't it? I'd rather this go wrong than someone drive into me,
Yeah.
I remember, and
framing.
Framing. Like we're talking to Al Sinclair, who rode in Rio, and certainly as well with athletes who rode in Tokyo, both two Olympic events that happened in really bad conditions. And Al said he's first 500 Olympic final men's pair, sort of going like, fucking hell, this is shit, this isn't going well. They sort of catch me and saying like, no, this is it, this is happening right now. It doesn't matter that you're not going to have your best row. It doesn't matter that it's windy. Like, it's here and it's happening. So like, there's that thing of like aiming for perfection, or like you said, playing what's in front of you.
Yeah, and that's all the old kind of controlling the controllables thing, isn't it? And yet there's so much stuff out there that we kind of all know that we don't practice.
Yeah,
like I know intellectually about this. I teach it all the time around control them. Focus on the stuff you control, not the stuff you can't. I can't control the fact that it's windy, but I can control the amount of focus I give to my start routine or doing my warm-up well or whatever it is. But we all still do slip into that mindset of drifting off into all the stuff that affects us that we can't do anything about. And it's interesting about, I think one of the things we have to start doing is having curiosity into term, like why does that happen? How can I notice it? How can I, like one of the, so I've done some mindfulness training and I like the phrase, kind of how can I gently bring myself back from that? And the phrase gently is important because rather than telling myself, oh, for fuck's sake, stop doing that. Yeah. Stop doing that stupid thing. Like the way we talk, like some of the phrases, oh, I'm being an idiot, or I'm being stupid, or that's a stupid thing. Like some of the language we use, the way we talk to ourselves.
Yeah, that's a big one currently in sport about self-talk, about how you talk to yourself. And there's a lot of videos, people zoom in on Cristiano Ronaldo before a penalty, and you can see him saying like, you're going to make it, you're going to make it.
You can do it.
I'm a strong, have you watched Ted Lasso? No. I'm a strong and capable man. Like you've got to watch, anyone who's watched Ted Lasso will know Colin saying I'm a strong and capable man. You need to go and watch Ted Lasso.
I had a funny one.
The best piece of TV made in the last 10 years.
I need to then, yeah. We had a friend. A friend was over for a barbecue. She had maybe like an 8-year-old daughter, and there's two raised sleeper beds, and she stood on one, and there's a bit of a jump to the next one, and I can see she like trying to jump. She would hold her back, and then she just stops, like clenches her fist and goes, "Believe," and then jumps. And I was like,
"No, you definitely need to watch Ted Lasso because that's like a whole thing in it."
Yeah. Like, and you're like, "Oh wow!" And then I look back at myself. It's funny. I do some like coaching more on the sort of psychological side with some rowers now. I'm like, so like positive self-talk is really important. You need to make sure like the voice in your head is really nice. I'm sort of sitting here going, but I was horrible to myself. Yeah. And I'm trying to give people advice to things that I never really got. And that's why we talk a lot about everything is a skill that takes time to learn. And like, you can't, even if I tell you right now, this is a perfect way to do things, you might be able to do it for a little bit, but it's not going to be perfect.
You'll slip off and you'll need reminding. Like a lot of the stuff. So I talk about the difference between things that are inherently complex and things that are simple but difficult. Yes. So things that complex problems require complex solutions, but we all love a simple
black and white.
And no more. That's no more true than the stuff we see in the media today, being given simple narratives to complex issues. Yeah. Equally, we sometimes make things more complex than they need to be. Some things are simple but difficult. So the third thing that makes a difference in the relationship between stress and performance, if you like that, wrapping it back around.
Yeah.
I've many tangents, whether that's more by accident than design, is psychological safety. So the social context that people find themselves in. Do people feel that they're in a context where they feel that they're part of a collective that cares about them? Do they feel that mistakes won't get held against them? Do they feel that if they speak up and disagree with someone, that will be punitive action? So to what extent do people feel that they're able to be their full selves, not a smaller mitigated version of themselves, all that kind of stuff? Environment where we can constructively disagree with each other without fear that it'll damage the relationship, all that kind of stuff. And so I teach quite a lot on that and intellectually understand it. And I talk about the cornerstones and the behaviors and the attitudes that create it. But when I talk about the attitudes, kindness and curiosity and humility, and I can often say on courses, and it's totally genuine. And my wife will tell you, I get this stuff wrong all the time. I find it really difficult. Like empathic listening. Listen to another person with curiosity without judging their perspective. It is simple.
Yeah.
But it's really fucking difficult.
Yeah.
It's really hard. Yeah. And it's basically impossible actually to do it 100% because we all see the world through our own lens, and you can't completely walk away from your own lens because it's there, it's in part of you. But you can try your very best to exercise curiosity before the judgment kicks in, or even recognize which of your judgments and biases might be affecting the way you're seeing this, and to think, just to be a bit more curious about that.
It's sort of the same mechanism as when you're talking about the nerves. You can be like, ignore it and it's not going to help, or you can accept that you're not going to be perfect and then do your best to keep trying to manage it.
Yeah, well, I talk with athletes about when you have a difficult emotion, like acknowledge, accept, then move on. So acknowledge it, name it, accept that it's part of you, and then you can choose to not lean into it. So it's that kind of. But if you just try and ignore it, this is the chimp paradox stuff. The chimp will break out eventually, but equally you don't want to let the chimp run your life. So acknowledge it, notice it. Oh yeah, that's that part of my brain that's trying to keep me safe. The brain doesn't know it's 2025 and I'm not going to get eaten by a tiger in a minute. All that kind of stuff. Notice it. realize that when you notice stuff, the intensity of emotions tend to subside after a while. And this is something, again, I can talk about, what I actually find very difficult because it is different for the ADHD brain. Because the intensity of emotions, emotions tend to flare up really well. One of the ways it manifests for me is that things flare up really high, really quick, and then but then they subside quite quickly. So I've had to learn to notice and recognize, and regulate's the wrong word because actually I can't regulate it, but I have to notice it and find a way to manage the situation.
Do you find that breathing helps with that?
Can do.
Yeah, tennis players talk about that a lot.
Yeah, breathing and exercise around breathing is a big thing around. I don't think there's any accident that almost all forms of meditative practice throughout history and breathing is a part of most of them in some way.
Yeah, you'll see like tennis players like digging in their fingers into their diaphragm, etc. And you'll be like, oh, they've got a stomach injury. Like, no, they're just trying to breathe and relax and like switch off.
Yeah, and also, but you're talking about the self-talk, and it's different for different people. I want examples like how you. I think tone of the way we talk ourselves is as important as what we say.
Not what you said, but how.
Two examples I often give are like, I've sometimes put a picture of Morgan Freeman. So like, listen, imagine this guy talking. You watch The Shawshank Redemption, and some of the best bit of that film is his narration in the background. It's like this soothing, and like, I've heard it said that Morgan Freeman could tell you in intimate detail how he's about to murder you with a butter knife, and you'd still feel relaxed. And then you put up a picture of Gordon Ramsay, and like, what's it like listening to this? And like, when things are not going well, not just what does the voice say, who does it sound more like? Sound more like Morgan Freeman's or sound more like Gordon Ramsay? And what effect does that have on your state? And like, it affects your physiological state. This is a big test thing, like the physiology of emotion.
Mind.
It's the physiology of emotion. It's understanding what's going on in us.
I love that, and I use that all the time. I talk to so many people, and you say like, it's really, really hard to be angry and not with that physical thing. So you can actually control your emotions by just doing something as simple as
changing what's happening in your body.
Which you do have control of, and then another that comes back to the breathing.
Something in your body.
The breathing,
100%. But just trying to control emotion using logic is the sort of least effective in the moment. You can use logical processes to set yourself up better in the build-up to things. But once you're in that hijacked state, you only have to say to someone, what's it like trying to have a logical conversation with someone who's really angry? Like, do you get through?
Yeah.
No. What do you do? Well, I wait till they calm down. Then, but you're doing the same thing to yourself.
Yeah.
You're hijacked, and you're trying to tell yourself not to be, and it's an ineffective strategy. Just calm down. The voice.
What do you think about, because we talked about like telling yourself like out loud what you're feeling, acknowledging it, etc. Like, I don't know how much you follow David Goggins, but
sorry,
David Goggins, but he will like very often, like if he has got an excuse, like he's a crazy running guy, ex-army, like one of the toughest people mentally in the world. I'm sure most people know him. And then he will just, if he's got like an excuse in his head, like I really don't want to go running right now, he just starts to like vocalize it out loud. He starts almost like laughing at himself about the mere excuses, etc. Stuff that his brain's on like come up with.
That kind of, it's kind of a bit similar to catastrophizing, like where you start actually outlining. So you should do this in coaching. So I don't want to do this because this bad thing will happen. Okay, let's talk through that. You get people to actually say, okay, then what would happen next? Well, I can't do this. I can't have a conversation with my boss because why not? Well, then they might fire me and that would happen. And then I wouldn't have any money because I couldn't find another job. So is that true? No, I wouldn't find another job, and then I'll lose my house. And of course, at some point, either they do themselves, you say, how likely is any of this to happen? And you have to be a little bit careful because you can, I think, depending on the sort of issue you're dealing with, I think in a coaching environment, you have to be a little bit careful that you're not going into those sorts of conversations with people where there's more going on, where they need more therapeutic support. But I think you can do that sort of thing with yourself, which sounds like what this guy's talking about, where you start to verbalize what's going on, and then your brain goes, actually, maybe that's not really. So because it's processing, right? As you go through it, the brain's processing, and what Steve Peters would call it, you're exercising the chimp.
Yeah,
you're allowing the chimp, because all the chimp's doing is and this is the same reason why it's hard to concentrate when you're hungry or thirsty. Yeah, because the chimp's going, you need food, you're going to die. You need water, you're going to die. You need to do this, you're going to die. As soon as the chimp goes, oh, you're listening to me. Yeah. Oh, you're paying attention to this stuff that I'm trying to tell you. And it calms down.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's the same thing with the athletes. And then what you realize is that in your own head, you can make something that's very unrealistic seem like it's definitely going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
But the moment that you actually say it out loud, well, I think, that I might dart up, or almost even saying it makes you realize that, this is actually a ridiculous thing that I've managed to convince myself in here. But if I tried to verbalize that to anyone else, that would make me realize how silly.
What are you talking about? None of this is like
Not even. You don't even need that person's response to be. You literally just by verbalizing it, you realize yourself take the power out of it.
And we're just not. I just think inclined often the time to just allow ourselves to process things
and just accept that we're not perfect and we never will be, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that takes us right back to that kind of how we frame success and how we feel in ourselves. And I think particularly if you've been in an environment where you're surrounded by people who've done more or gone further or been more successful in that sense, and I think what are the reasons that I want to do this? What are the things that matter to me? I think it sounds obvious, but I think often we don't ever pay attention to that. What are my reasons and motivations for doing this?
So I've got a follow-up question to this for you. What is your reason for choosing medical industry?
To be honest, it just happened. It just, like, I was interested in people and teams and performance, and the opportunity came by to work with someone who was working in that domain, and that grew because it's interesting. And I suppose, why do I stay in it? The opportunity, I suppose, if you can make a difference, is to do something that can genuinely make a difference to people who are doing some of the most important work that you can possibly do, but I think it really bothers me that there are so many people out there who either by other people or in their own mind, they are either being blamed or they feel individually responsible for these things that happen, and it isn't about them as individuals. It's the systems of work that they're in. And look, there's some big things that are realities that are really difficult to change. There just isn't enough funding. There aren't enough people. That there are big ticket items like that that's beyond the guess of most of us to change. But there are also lots of other more local things that can change and can be different, that can help people to be able to do their job, because there's no shortage. One of the phrase I use is, how do you create conditions that allow people to be and perform at their best? That's my sort of snapshot of human factors. And my observation is, if you look at the NHS, it's full of brilliant people who turn up to work and they want to do the best job they can. You get variation in performance. Why do you get variation in performance? How can we understand that better? How can we be curious about the factors that contribute to that, and be curious about performance at all levels, good, bad, and indifferent, and what causes it? It's what causes the variation, and how can we understand that better? And what's that telling us about what we need to change, rather than just focusing on the people at the sharp end. So it's not why I got into it, but I suppose it's what it keeps you. But I don't think I had a reason for getting into any of the stuff that I've done,
other than the fact that I think
just ended up there.
Yeah, but because what you really enjoy is that the endless progress of how can we perform better and become better. And I think there's probably a lot of people in a lot of sports.
Yeah, I suppose I am in my heart, I'm a coach at heart.
Yeah.
Someone asked me, so I did a talk yesterday. It was actually a corporate. So I was doing a keynote talk at a corporate, it was a company's end of the year sales team end of year thing. And I talked about some of the stuff we talked about today, and a bit about my story. And so bizarrely, last 2 days, I've had these conversations with people completely unconnected to the medical industry, which is like the only 2 times I've done this in the last few years. So it's quite weird. And one of them said, like, what do you miss about coaching? Right. Like, because, I said, I haven't done it for a while. The last time I did it full time was 2012. I've dipped in and out. I've done bits and pieces since then, but not full time. And I said, it's seeing the development in the people that you're coaching. And it sounds like a bit of a trite answer, doesn't it? But that genuinely for me was, and some of the most rewarding memories I have are from people who never really rowing's never going to be their big thing.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Like a kid who didn't even think they could row at all, and the height of their achievement was managing to get out of the C crew into the B crew. But for them, that I remember this kid once wrote me a little note when I was leaving Moncton and said, you've changed my perception on sport and what I think I thought I could achieve.
Yeah,
Now, there were other sports that were much more important to that kid that will go on and do. But it was that you've changed my perception on sport as a whole. Like, so as a person, as an athlete, that now I don't know, I'll never know how that's gone on to manifest in that person's life. But that means far more to me than the medals and all that kind of
rowing
stuff. They're great, but
rowing just becomes the vehicle to unlock your potential. Like the example I heard was the same thing. Like someone coaching kids who are never going to be fantastic rowers, but watching the light bulb moment in a kid's head be like, "This is something I never thought I could do. I've just done it. What else could I do?"
And there's so many things that you can take out of it. And manage different competing priorities in your life, and you can do more than you think you can, and how many things we say, I can't do this because I've got too much on, their excuses, and how do you navigate that, and a big thing, this is one of the reasons why when I put those kids of all those different ages in that 8 in South Africa, one of the reasons I wanted to do it was because and this is go back to the boys in the boat stuff, right? I'm sure many people listening will have read the book. Sadly the film was a bit disappointing, but the book
wasn't it?
It wasn't your fault.
It's
hard, isn't it, to condense the intricacies of a story like that into such a short film. But
also 20 lengths in like 200 meters. Come on.
Yeah, exactly right. But the reality of it is obviously a bit different, and that kind of like, how do you bring this group together to produce a performance that's great in the sum of its parts, and like give yourself over to the needs of the collective, and that learn how to work with people if you don't like them or are very different to them.
I think that's one interesting,
and that's really key, isn't it? And then Steve Redgrave has talked about that with him and Andy Holmes. You didn't get on, and there's loads. I mean, some of those kids, that I was coaching in that, 2 of them, they were basically told by the school, you need to do something constructive for the school or you're actually going to get kicked out. And so rowing was the thing, because they did it and they got good and they were winning medals. So this was their like, hey, see, look, we're doing something. So that was the height of their kind of ambition. I think actually they did kind of quite enjoy doing well, but it was that kind of don't want to admit it almost. But then I had other kids who wanted to be in the South African national team. So this massive variety of age and personality, but also ambition. How do you make that work? And that was really difficult at times, caused a lot of tension. I haven't turned up for training again and this and that. But I was absolutely convinced that navigating those difficulties was really important. And if I could create a situation that putting them in that situation, as difficult it was at the time, was actually really, I'll stand by that was the benefit of that. As a kind of learning experience, that learning to figure out how to work with people that you are different to is important.
Very important.
Anything you do in life,
you're
going to have to figure that out. Figure out, you don't have to be everyone's best mate, but you have to figure out a way to work together.
Almost if you're going to work,
will be.
Yeah.
You think like everyone, oh, you must be best mates with the guys you won Henley with. Well, there's some of them, but not all of them.
Yeah.
But also, you're almost guaranteed to be more likely spending time and working with people that you don't get on with that well than you are with people that you do get on with.
Yeah.
Because right a law probably.
And it doesn't have to be right. Like now, I would say,
it
doesn't have to be rowing. It doesn't even have to be sport. It could be anything. It could be any kind of team, anything on a team endeavor. So like a drama where you have to produce a play with these different, or being part of an orchestra, or all of those kind of things, or any of them. Rowing is particularly because you're quite literally in the same boat, and the whole kind of pulling together thing is the whole literal and that thing. But so that was always. So I do miss that aspect of it. I do. And the other question I got asked yesterday was, would you go back into it? I was like, full time professionally, no, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't miss the being beholden every weekend, being taken out all through the year. I mean, I've got 2 kids now, 4 and 6, so like, that's very difficult. But yeah, the kind of seeing the personal development, the people you work with, is that's the thing that I reflect back on the most.
Definitely. But I think I agree that you can miss something without wanting to be there again, and it's great that it happened, and that's kind of the privilege thing, the more you maybe sometimes the more you do miss something, that the better it is. I always find it funny sometimes the people who were at the highest level and now have absolutely no involvement in rowing whatsoever, and you're like, oh, it never was about rowing for you, it was about it was performing at the highest level, and you just found the way that you could do it.
It was a vehicle.
I just think I think competition, I think, like fishing has always been my hobby. It's always been my obsession before I got to rowing, and then a kind of ADHD obsession, right? That was my session. And like you talked about every birthday and Christmas, literally from 9 to like till I started rowing. Every birthday, every Christmas.
Just looking in the Argos catalogue.
Yeah, literally every little thing, like obsessive. And then the rowing started, and it just took over.
Yeah.
And then the rowing stopped, and that took over. And basically, I used to do it just like I'd go, and now I've found competitive fishing. So now I just do matches in that instead. So now that's become my latest obsession.
Yeah, well, I think I might need to get tested for ADHD because this is sounding like my life.
So I've just found another way of like competing in something I'm interested in. So now my wife's just like, find another obsession.
We have just
take up all your time.
Just listening to like what we have to say at the table. We have so much in common. The three of us is actually scary, but it's nice.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people do. I think the exploration of neurodiversity is becoming more openly talked about, which I think is a really good thing. And obviously, like Cara McMurtry is doing that.
We need to get her on.
I think that would be really interesting. I think to kind of just wasn't talked about. I always never felt I fitted really in any of the environments I was in that I rode in. And there's probably various reasons for that.
It's not a bad thing. Just means you're meant for different things.
Yeah, no, I've always found that. Always felt like a bit of a square peg in a round hole. In all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Well, this has been absolutely amazing.
Well, I've got a question as well still. In terms of increasing performance and analyzing the factors that create the best performance, obviously managing risk and safety in the healthcare industry is a much bigger thing than, for example, in sport, because we talked about that thing where you don't die, etc. But do you think focusing too much on safety and risk management is actually a hindrance to progress and performance?
And safety. Well, one of the things I talk
because
about is
unless you're risking something terrible happening, will you ever get that rocket to fall down and be caught by the booster? Do you see what I mean?
So it's an interesting one. So again, how do I summarize risk and attitude to risk? I go back to difference between work that's simple, complicated, and complex. So the best example I can give of simple work is baking a cake.
Mm-hmm.
So baking a cake is a linear, step-by-step, sequential process. But if you haven't done it before, it's difficult, and you'll get unintended results, right? So there's all these memes about what a cake should look like and what they look like when you made it.
Yeah.
All right. So success comes from a predefined recipe that's well written, that's easy to follow, having the required equipment and enough time. If you get a well-written recipe, it's easy to follow. You get enough time to practice. You do it a few times. Once you've produced the result once, the chances are you'll be able to keep repeating it, as long as you've got the conditions that you're working in being conducive to that. So
success is a habit.
You have the right equipment, all that kind of stuff. Complicated stuff, you bundle simple things together. So putting a rocket into space is a good example of complicated work. It's not actually, it's still repeatable. You can write a rule book for it because it's based on Newtonian physics. So calculating the thrust to weight ratio for a rocket to break the gravitational pull of the Earth is an equation. I can't do it, but someone with the right expertise can. But you need a collection of different equations. So you could substitute the word rule for equation, algorithm, recipe. They mean the same thing. They're a preordained, predefined way of doing something. So you can replicate. So if you say to NASA, what's the chance of success of successfully putting a rocket into orbit and bringing it back again? They won't say 100%, but they'll give you pretty close because they know there's a rule book for it. Now, it's a pretty long rule book and you need a lot of expertise to do it, but you can replicate it. Best example of complex work, and anyone here who is a parent listening to this will agree, is raising children. You cannot write a rule book for raising children. Principles are helpful. Intent is important. Previous experience is helpful. But as I've learned, just because something worked with your first child doesn't mean it will work with your second child. So every little person is unique and different. So therefore, your approach has to be much more adaptive. So it's about play what's in front of you. So try something. Did that work? Did it not work? How can you adapt? So it's constant adaptation. Now, constant adaptation in baking a cake is not helpful because it's the chemistry of how the ingredients interact that make it work. So people watch bake, they open the oven too many times because it's actually going to be exact and precise. You don't want to adapt. And so you're at a really high level of expertise and you're experimenting and then you're the one writing the recipes, but even though that be in a controlled environment. So some work has to be about adaptation. So the attitude to risk has to be much more of embracing risk to do the work. One has to use actually risk avoidance. So actually attitude to risk is context dependent. And in a sporting context, rowing, simple. Competitive motion, do the same thing over and over again. You can predefine, preordain, right? Whereas a lot of like team ball sports are complex. Lots of moving parts. Like you track the movement of a ball on a football pitch and two matches with the same two teams, it'll be totally different every time. It's high levels of complexity, almost chaos going on. So how do you manage that, and how do you deal with that? So I don't know if that answers your question, but in terms of over focus on safety and risk, I do think within risk industries, that is interesting to your listeners of this or not, but I sometimes talk about safety being the byproduct of high performance, because safety is one of a number of competing priorities. So every risk organization, so construction, aviation, rail, nuclear, healthcare, basically when risk industries, when things go wrong, when people get hurt or killed, will have some sort of slogan on their website or that they put up saying safety is our number one priority. Yeah, you walk past a construction site and they'll be like, we're a safe constructor, safety is not, and it's always bollocks. And I'm not saying they don't care about it. I'm saying it's not their number one priority. If safety was the number one priority for an airline, you wouldn't have people 40,000 feet up in the air traveling 500 miles an hour. You wouldn't cut people open on an operating table. You wouldn't put people up on high bits of scaffolding. Safety is not the number one priority. The completion of the work is the number one priority. Getting people from London to New York is the number one priority for that airline. And there's efficiency and there's cost and it's one of a lot of priorities. So what I'm often interested in is talking about how do you manage that? And so I wish I could just use a high performance narrative and to say, what's high performance look like? Safety is one of the objectives you're looking for. How do you make sure that safety isn't compromised more than it has to be in the pursuit of whatever the objective is you're doing? I can say the problem we have in healthcare is that the performance language is connected to other stuff. So it's already, all language is loaded. So the performance language is always loaded. So I end up having to do this stuff with a language of safety because that's what people are focused on.
Yeah.
So patient safety means generally, how do we prevent unintended consequences to patients?
So is that a hindrance to producing?
It can be, yeah, because when you talk about patient safety, people immediately go, well, how do you prevent patient safety incidents, things going wrong, which inevitably means that's all people focus on.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to, so there's also the other word that's used in healthcare, which is quality, which basically equates to how do patients get the best possible care? So which is all in some ways like a better focus, because it often like,
the byproduct of the best possible care is known.
It should be safer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can, so there's sometimes if you, what often a analogy I sometimes use is, let's say there's the particular issue in the prescribing of medications, right? Medication errors, people getting the wrong stuff or the wrong amounts of stuff. If let's say we're going to use a 1 to 5 scale. 5 is the best possible, most reliable, nothing ever goes. 0 is obviously the worst possible. If you're somewhere between a 0 and a 3, we call it a safety problem. If you're a 3 and trying to get to a 5, you call it quality improvement. Basically, we're okay and we're trying to be brilliant. It could be the same issue, but they use different language. So yes, an over-focus on safety can kind of be a hindrance in a way, but equally, I don't think you'll ever get away from the language, and it is important that we acknowledge that these issues are out there. Because right now, the figures out there have been pretty static over the last 30 years. Currently in the NHS, and this is pretty consistent globally, 1 in 10 patients, 10% of patients treated at the moment have some form of unintended consequence happen to them of varying levels of severity. But that's obviously far too high. So that is a patient safety issue that has to be acknowledged and something done about. What often I'm arguing is, if 10% of patients have something bad happen to them, that means 90% don't. If you only study the 10%, you won't be able to improve your system because your work is complex. When your work's quite simple, baking a cake, production lines in a factory, making cars, all that kind of stuff. If your work's the same every day and you only study 10% of it, 1% of it, your chance of improving your system works pretty high. If your work's totally different every day, and you only study a high percentage, you don't really understand how your work's going on, so you don't you guess about what you should change. So you need a broader understanding, and a lot of that's about soft intelligence. You can't formally investigate everything that happens, every good, bad, and indifferent thing, but you can have conversations about it. You can't have formal reporting you can have formal reporting structures for significant events, good or bad.
Yeah.
But a lot of learning in complex systems has to come about through soft intelligence. And that is about creating, and it goes back to psychological safety. Do people feel able to say to someone in a higher level of position, I'm worried about, I have concerns about, or I made a mistake. and I made that mistake, nothing happened to the patient today, but if I made it, someone else could make it. Can we look at how that happened? Or, do you know what I mean? These kind of, the soft intelligence, the conversations that happen. And again, part of the problem is the system is just so massively pressured. You know, that there is, people are under such huge pressure, waiting lists. And it's a really, really challenging environment for people to work in at the moment. So the people who work in it have my unending respect, and anything that the work we do can do to move things at least some way in the direction of the systems of work being better.
It's interesting how high performance is different across the different industries. Obviously, in sport and medical industry, the challenges seem almost similar, but the solutions are.
Well, people are people, right? So people are people, no matter where you put them, right? So I go back to that comparison of orthopedic surgery and community psychiatry, basketball and table tennis. So human performance is what it is. Like, so hand-eye coordination, the principles are the same. Humans are humans, but how you train. So you have to understand that principle, right? Principles of how you develop agility the principles how you do it, but the application of the principles has to be contextually specific. So the drill that you might have a table tennis doing might be different will be different to the drill you have basketball players doing. It's based on the same underpinning knowledge about human physiology and psychology and all that other stuff, so it has to be context specific. So humans are humans. So the stuff that you learn through studying humans in other contexts absolutely is applicable across others. But how you then apply that principle has to be context specific. That's why I deliberately work and have tried to bring a team together of people who come from all sorts of different contexts. And it's often, I'm not an expert in anything. I know a little bit about a lot of things. And I try to interact with and learn from and listen to and watch and meet people who are experts in different things. Because I think, that's really useful. That's really interesting. And I wonder how that connects to this thing over here. And how do you piece it all together? That's I suppose the challenge. Yeah. And the more complex the work, the bigger that challenge. And I don't pretend to have the answers, but I suppose my goal is to try and help understand a little bit more about how people function individually, how people function collectively, and how people are affected by the systems of work that they're in, such that we are better placed to make improvements that make the work more reliable, higher performing. Yeah. Now in rowing, it's all based on how do you define high performance? We go from A to B as fast as possible. So that's the thing that you're measuring. In healthcare, it's going to be different, but in healthcare, it's varied. So high performance to someone working in A&E is very different to someone working in palliative care. So like one is the avoidance of death and one is giving someone a good death. So you can get a lot of conflicting priorities and stuff like that. And so that can be interesting to explore with people.
It's almost like it's not one field, but like so many different things.
Healthcare is not one industry. It's 20 industries under one banner. That's what makes it so.
But I like what you said, that even with the cross-applicable principles, so you look at the 10% of patients have like unintended consequences, 90% don't. And there's the same thing in rowing. If you only focus, like you said, on the 10%, you'd never investigate what things are going well. And then the same thing, if you only focus on the negative and not actually focus on what you're doing more of, that can be applied into the boat. It's what we spoke about earlier. You know, the coach never really tells you why you performed well. They only will talk to you when you've performed.
Good coaches do. And someone said this to me when I was coaching at Claire's Court. So I would have been 24, 23, something like that. I hadn't been coaching very long, and there was a particular kid that I could see could be better than they could be, but was unreliable, turning up to training and putting in the effort, right? It's a classic thing. And I remember kind of having a bit of a moan to his parents a couple of times about this and saying, come on, he's saying he wants to do well, he's saying he wants to get in the A group, he's not turning up to training, he's not trying that hard when he comes, and they didn't really engage with that. And one of the teachers at the school, I guess a more experienced educator, said, how many times have you contacted his parents to say something positive? So what do you mean? Have you ever contacted his parents to tell them about something he's done well? So, no. So how do you think it feels to them every time you contact them to talk about their son? Is it any surprise that now really, like, some people are very good at putting their personal stuff to the side and still responding in a constructive way, but we're all humans as well. And I know as a parent, you can't be objective.
Yeah.
And nor should you be. You're in a child's corner. Of course you are. You must have unconditional support for them, that you're the one person that they should count on for unconditional support. And we're thinking, that's a very good point. So I made a point to like wait to go looking for this moment of like, when he came, he did a good session. I told him, because in my mind, I was telling him, I said, I just want to say, like, he did a really good session today, like, real big, like, really worked hard. And it was like magic. It changed the relationship. And then when I did have to have a bit of a kind of say, look, he hasn't turned up the last couple of sessions, this is not helping his, like, it changed the dynamic completely. And there's all these little nuggets I look back on, and most of it is people who know more than I do, telling me stuff. And they're going, oh yeah, that's a good point.
That's life. That is.
And like, we're all standing on someone else's shoulders, aren't we?
Yeah,
and that's why I hate the notion of self-made. Like everyone says, Arnie, I don't. Like Arnie talks about this.
Yeah.
Like, call me whatever you like. Don't call me a self-made man. Just loves Arnie.
Yeah, everyone does that.
Well, that's why we got a big place for it.
I saw that. Yeah, pumping iron. Gotta love a bit of pumping iron. But yeah, no, I do. He's done some really good stuff actually. But yeah, that don't call me. We've all been helped. And I'm really fortunate. I've had some really helpful, less
tribal
helpful
people. We're not alphas, They're not like tigers. Social species, hierarchical species. There's no shame in using other people to,
It's not shame. It's not impossible. It's impossible to do without it.
It's acknowledge that, and I think that's, and then what's the role? How can I give that?
You get some people get allowed.
Pay it forward.
I'm going to prove to everyone else that I can do it by myself. No one ever did it by themselves.
That's another thing in rowing, isn't it?
But
it's beneficial that you have to learn that you can't do it by yourself.
Sweeping,
and we've all been in that situation where we've ripped the rhythm apart in the boat because we're trying to compensate for it, but we're trying to do it by ourselves rather than work with others. And the coach just pointed that out. And we've realised you can't do it by yourself, and you have to do. One of the things I said to the group yesterday, because I like self-team, I said, like, one of the things like rowing, I always just say, like, if you're in a 4, you've all got 25% responsibility for the performance. Do your 25%. Don't try and do 26, but don't do 24. Don't let someone else pick up the slack for you. Do your 25%. How are you going to do yours? Don't try and do someone else's job. And that goes alongside that notion of, this is now the chessism. Like, the day you think you're the best in the boat is the day you're slowing it down. Which is like, because whenever you think you're the best in the boat, immediately things aren't going well. You're thinking about everyone else and what they're doing wrong, rather than going, how do I do my 25%? Like, those two they often use those in conjunction with each other to say, like, what's your percentage? How do you get as close as possible to that percentage? And just remember, like, the day you think you're the best in the boat is the day you're saying it.
Don't talk to people about, wow, being last in the boat feels like the worst, but it's actually the best.
100%.
Because you're always rowing in the best boat you've ever been in.
100%.
But you'll sit there going like, fuck, I'm not.
Or I think I was always like desperate. I want to be. I don't want to be the best, because I know, again, I always knew if I was the best in the boat wouldn't be that fast.
Yeah,
but I always used to I talked about this fresh in my mind because I was talking about it yesterday. Like, how do you bring the best out in the people around you? Like, so it's not, and this sounds contrary to the 25%. It's not, because it's individually you need to do your 25%, but then how do you do that in a way that helps bring out the best and enables others to do their bit as well as possible? I always did better in seat racing than a single. And that's partly because, so the same coach who laughed at me when I said I wanted to be the first 8, he also told me I couldn't pull the skin off a rice pudding when I was J15. And he was right, but that's not really the point. When all think, I was never gonna be the one that got recognised because of erg scores, and even in a single, in flat conditions, flat track, I was gonna get my handed to. I just didn't have the power. I'd sometimes outperform people in rough water because you go into that mindset of, because I think mindset's something I can control. So can I control? How can I handle these conditions better than someone else, so I can beat someone I wouldn't usually beat? So can I turn that to my advantage? And then, but seat racing, I always think I kind of felt like I realized fairly on it, which everyone realizes at some point, it's not just how well you do, it's how well the boat does. I don't have to win this race on my own. I can use these other people to win this seat race for me. If I can, so I was used to, like in seat racing, everyone's kind of like lolling and they're dragging themselves out of the boat. How can I make so I used to try and think a lot about my body language when I was getting out of the boat and getting into the other boat. Can I have more positive body language? I look like I'm up for the next race. I know I'm nearly dying. Mm-hmm. And none of us know how many races are still coming, but how can I look like I'm up for this next race? How can I have a positive impact on this boat so that these, not just me, but these other 3 people in the boat perform 1 or 2% better than they did in the last race, because that will benefit. It's a slightly selfish way to look at teamwork, but I was like, well, I've got to do that. And that's
I love the mind games.
Everyone does that. The team performs better, so it's not selfish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in
positive manipulation.
But it's just thinking, how can I conduct myself in a way that creates an environment that, like, even without realizing it, brings more out in the people around me. And I always do better in seat racing than in singles. But yeah,
single is a tough boat.
Yeah,
I was never faster than single. Thank God for sweeping.
Yeah, maybe a pair or a quad.
So, are you going to do any more rowing collaborations for your business, or is that something that you're using one for the other sort of thing? I feel like there's a lot of links, and I feel like the stuff that you're talking about is also something that could benefit a lot of rowing teams, not just medical teams.
So actually of late I've started, like I say, I did a talk yesterday. So the answer to that is yes, I am looking at how, having now done this work for having kind of transitioned from competing in rowing to coaching in rowing to kind of like coaching more generally, and then kind of specialized, I suppose, into working with teams and organizations in healthcare. I'm now kind of thinking about how I'll keep doing the work in healthcare, but then take some of what we've learned through all that work for these sort of these really complex organizations to go almost back around into sport and education and companies and stuff like that. So I'm looking at that at the moment, actually.
Cool.
Some of the companies I've started talking to and working with are sort of in the healthcare space, so they already have some knowledge of us, and I've like pharmaceutical companies and medical device companies and things like that. But I mean, to be honest, the kind of stuff we do then would be applicable to anyone, any sort of organization.
I think there's so much, like so many similarities. Control the controllables, no talent required. Pressure is a privilege. There's lots of things that we talk about a lot in rowing, but you're like, we don't know the process, the mechanism behind
it's the connections. It's connecting all these things together.
Yeah.
That's someone said to me, you're an integrationist. I was like, what do you mean? So will you tie things together? I was like, oh yeah, I suppose you are. I suppose I am really. I'm not an expert in anything. I know a little bit about all these.
Application is the key.
Integration of things and the application of them. But again, I would say application has to be done by the people who know the work. So I don't tell people who work in healthcare to apply the stuff I'm teaching them. I try and teach them some concepts and then facilitate conversations with them about how those concepts apply in their work, because I'm not an expert in their work. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to tell them how to apply it in their work.
You can put the idea in there, but they have to come to their own conclusion.
That's what makes me effective in that context as opposed to rowing. Like, I think I know. So if I went back into rowing coaching now, it'd be terrible, because I think I'd know. But everything's moved on. I haven't done it for a while. I'd probably not know. I was thinking, someone asked me, would you go back into it? I was like, if I went back into coaching now, I feel like I'd need to go and do a fair bit of watching before I said anything to anybody.
Do a Johnsty, go to Australia.
Well, I just have to go and brush up a bit, because I think things have moved on a bit. Well, I mean, look, people are still people, but biomechanics are moving about aspects are still similar, but there's a lot more science involved these days.
There's a lot more, I think, of what you're talking about as a benefit that could be used. But I find it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, as you can say, I can prattle on about this stuff days.
Nearly 3 hours.
Have we?
Yeah.
Jesus. Apologies.
No, that's...
I don't know if anyone...
We can tell
has anyone lasted for
Rob
3
Morgan,
hours?
Rob Morgan.
I also don't care.
Has anyone actually hung in there for 3 hours?
We realised with the podcast that you can't make content for everyone. So the only thing you can really do is make content that you would love and hope that other people love it.
Yeah, so I guess some people like lots of podcasts. Some I listen to half an hour, some I listen to half of it, some I listen to all of it. And that's fine. So if people listen and take one or two things that are interesting, that's brilliant. And if How people listen to all of it. That's great as well.
I think there's a lot of more. I was in a rowing club today, and someone came up to me and was like, she said something like, "I've spent far too much time in this gym listening to you." It's like, that's a good thing. That's good.
Yeah. I suppose one thing I haven't said yet, I was thinking about on the way up, I think I spent a lot of my early career when I was disappointed about things not being selected. I directed that at other people and criticised other people, and so yeah, to anyone I did that to, I'm sorry. I think I judged other people's performance or said other people shouldn't have got selected for something that I thought I should have had. And what was really going on is I was struggling with my own insecurities and stuff that I thought I was entitled to, and yeah.
Things we need to remember is that it's everyone's first time round on the planet.
Yeah,
so it's not a do-over. No one's got the hindsight, and we're all just winging it.
Yeah,
so
it's not, nothing reminds you about that more than parenting.
Yeah.
So if you have that experience, then we're all definitely all winging it in that sense. But my wife would tell you that the sound of my own voice, pretty much talking about myself, is pretty much my favourite activity. So you've given me several hours of indulgence of just to prattle on. So
I love. I also just having done this, like, real pleasure in watching someone just love what they're doing and talk about what they love, which is really great. And I think that's what people like listening to. So.
And we do find it fascinating. There's so much I'm going to take away from this episode as well. Just even teamwork and talking to other people, feedback, that sort of thing. I suppose one thing, go looking for moments of excellence. Mm-hmm. Chasing excellence.
Go looking, be an appreciative, I call it, be an appreciative explorer. Go looking for those moments of excellence and tell people when you see them, point them out. If nothing else, it'll make people feel good. And then the thing I've realized in a lot of coaching is you'll never know, because people often don't show it, who's struggling with confidence and who isn't, because it's often not visible. So you'll never know that. Often you'll never know until much later, or you may never find out the moments. Sometimes when you point something out, someone's doing well, they know it, and they're feeling fine in themselves, and it doesn't have much of an impact. Sometimes when you do that, unbeknown to you, that person was struggling a bit, and you saying, and its specificity is important. Just saying well done or thank you, but well done. I'd noticed the way you were, or you really improved this, that, and that today. I think that worked better today because. So giving people specific positive feedback, it would, I think, surprise people to know the amount of times that, unbeknown to them, that person was maybe struggling with confidence a little bit, and that really impacted them and helped them.
What you said about people saying that you were the confident one, even when you didn't feel it. When someone described me as being endlessly positive, and I was like, "Are you fucking joking?" I'm dying inside, but apparently
our reality is often different to other perceptions. So big thing we talk about so much, like perception is so varied. It's why police always want to interview lots of different people in the aftermath of an incident, because they know you only ask one person a perception of an event, because we all have gaps in of what we see, and the brain makes stuff up to fill in the gaps in a story, and it uses our previous experience and our biases to fill the gaps, and there's inaccuracies in that. So our perception is our reality, and even if it's that one thing, people go looking. And my mum said that when my brother and I were little, she was at her wit's end. So my mum, my mum and dad left when I was 11, and so my mum was a single parent, 2 teenage boys. She went off and did a degree, a master's and a PhD in psychology, became a counselling psychologist. She hadn't done an access course to get into university as well. So I think it was 7 years all told, whilst being a single parent to 2 teenage boys, which I found quite impressive. And she said that her journey into being interested in psychology was based on the fact that she was so traumatized by bringing us up. She went to parenting skills classes, and in the parenting skills class, they said to her about positive reinforcement. Just like she was describing the story of we're tearing each other to pieces at the dinner table and throwing things and hitting each other and all that kind of stuff. And she's like, but what if there is nothing positive? And the teacher just said, find something.
It's true.
And so she tells a story of she came back, and her aunt, so this is actually Jess's ex-wife, who was there with us, And there's this bedlam at the dinner table, and there's like 10 seconds of quiet where we're just sitting and eating. And she goes, "Oh, isn't it how you're sitting so nicely eating your dinner?" And our sister looks at her like she's got two heads going, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "But it worked.
Yeah.
It makes a difference." And it is that kind of, but it's not innate. It's not, we have to think about it. And to me, it's different to toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is that kind of like, just turn that frown upside down, like telling people to be positive when they're feeling really rubbish, because it lacks empathy.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in positive psychology, and there's a really good TED talk by a guy called Sean Aker. He talks about pushing happiness over the cognitive horizon. You get close to the thing you want, and then you just move the goalposts and all that stuff. So how you cultivate positive and happiness and stuff like that, I think I'm really interested with it. I think people then often misassociate that with toxic positivity, which is that whole kind of like, you just put your Mr. Motivator hat on and go, "Hey, it's all going to be fine," which is also equally unhelpful because it's not genuine, it's not authentic.
Unless you are genuinely
that's
endless
feedback has to be
person.
genuine. Why am I getting like, you have to, that's why I say you have to go looking. Don't like, and the worst thing you can do as a coach sometimes is just give positive feedback when it's not. Like, you're trying to get them to improve something and they're not. And sometimes you go, "Yeah, that was better," and it wasn't. And actually what's really going on is you're struggling with the fact that you as a coach haven't managed to find a way of explaining it in a way that works. So you're trying to convince yourself that it's getting better.
So I had a
So it's like forced positivity, and it's not genuine, and it's actually about you, not about the athlete. So it's not doing it for the right reasons, and so that's different.
So I always try to be positive,
genuine,
especially when you're coaching athletes who are not full-time high performers. They're doing this for fun. I'd try to be formed. And then they told me at the end of the season once, they were like, "Well, we would know if we'd done one loop and then Tom says, 'Okay, not bad,' we know that means you're doing shit." Because that's, they just moved it anyway. They just moved, because I didn't want to say it was shit. And then if I said that was fucking amazing, then they knew it was good. But they'll reassess it.
They'll 100%. So authenticity goes a long way.
Yeah.
In that.
Is the highest state of vibration that humans can be in, according to...
So what?
Is the highest state of vibration that humans can find themselves in and like sort of operate on?
Yeah, it's everything. It's everything. Yeah.
You can go through an authentic path.
Yeah. We should do a quick fire.
Which
has been
absolutely
amazing. So I've say, having looked a little bit and seen what you do now and been like, that's going to be interesting. And actually that's like fucking interesting.
We're definitely having you again.
Is that just your like, is this now like,
no.
Oh, that's actually a bit shit.
No. Well, no, because if you're not sit me just being like a kid in the candy store, just being like, "This is amazing."
Definitely having you on again.
Yeah.
I think you come back and prattle on a bit more.
Maybe you could like break down an Olympic champion or something, and then just like pick their psychology.
There's different elements of that. Like, obviously, we skated over bits and pieces, and like, there's different things that you could probably explore a bit more. Depends, I suppose, what you think would be interesting, or
psychology in general, performers. That's the whole reason.
I want to kind of like, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not formally qualified in.
It's just a curious.
Do you know what I mean? I'm not, and I'd be the first to say, like I said, I'm not an expert in anything. So I can only talk to my perspective or experience on certain things, or how I've seen things manifest in the different work I've done.
As long as the conversation is genuinely curious, then
that's it.
What you
said. And that's be curious, and you need to watch. Can I give you that homework that if I come on again, you need to watch Ted Lasso before we watch it again?
Okay.
Before we come again.
Yeah. That sounds good. You'll definitely do that. So quick fire round questions.
Sure, no.
Out of all the rowing venues that you've trained at, raced at, or visited, what are some of your favourites and why?
You know, I should have prepared myself for this. No. I've heard you ask. That's not other people. It's an easy winner for me. So there's a lake called Zanin in South Africa. So it's in Limpopo, which is several hours northeast of Johannesburg. So right up towards Zimbabwe. It's in the middle of the bush. It's huge. It's 11 kilometers long. It's got these bays. It's huge, and it's got hippos and crocodiles, and you see monitor lizards coming down to drink, and monkeys in the trees, and it's kind of like exactly. So when you're in Johannesburg, like it's not Africa as you imagine Africa, like it's a big city, and like, but this is like being in the African bush. It's really cool.
No.
So Zanin. So we used to go there on training camps with the national team. I think they do go from there time to time, but they tend to go to Lesotho more now. more sort of more mountainous place. But Ardennes, it was just this most amazing place. So you'd go and you're just staying in this little bush camp, and there's nothing else around. Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. And I used to take my fishing gear as well. So I'd be camping by the lake, fishing overnight.
What is it?
I was catching carp. But then me and AJ used to go out in the boat catching bass in between training sessions. And yeah, so I'd go fishing between sessions. And we went there for 2 10-day stretches. I mean, we went for 10 days and we came back for a couple of days and we went again for 10 days. So it was just 20 days staying in this most magical place. Anyone who listens who's ever been there, I'll be fascinated if anyone has some familiarity will probably know what I'm talking about. So yeah, that would definitely be. I never rode on it myself, but I coached on it. Yeah, the one has the hippos. You have to be careful with them. So
I'm gonna have to look it up. It sounds great.
Yeah, yeah. You'd sometimes see them, and you'd have to really give them a wide berth because the stuff they say about how dangerous hippos are really is true. You didn't tend to see the crocs. They tended to stay down the little ends of these narrow arms, well away from you, but you couldn't leave any food lying around because the monkeys would come and steal it.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So, yeah,
great.
So legs the name.
I think I know the answer to the next one, but maybe I don't. If you were to repeat one race or one event again when you're 60 or 70, what would it be and why? Either to relive it or to change the outcome.
To relive it or change the outcome. It probably says something about human nature, the fact that I can think of 3 off the top of my head where I'd want to change the outcome.
Yeah.
There's a few. Do I have to give one?
No, you can go for it.
So
no rules.
I'm going to. The Henny final is an interesting one because we had a really bad second stroke, and I think that threw the rhythm off. I'm not convinced it would have changed the outcome. The bits are by length and a half, and I'm not sure. I'm not convinced. There is one that I would really. So we were talking about like planning for the unexpected. So we were on the receiving end of someone handling a difficult situation really well and beating us. So in 2015, I decided to have a season of club rowing. And this was, I don't know if you remember Marlow Rowing Club's boathouse burnt down.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no facility for a while. And then they had this amazing new boathouse built. But me and my brother and Tom Wilkinson and Josh Davidson and a few others.
Joshy Boy.
All got together and said, right, let's have a season of club rowing down at Marlow to try and kind of get it's success breeds success. If you have a few people come down, they do well. So we did a season of club rowing. It was difficult in life and not training all the time, not doing proper full winter, but doing as much as we can. And we came 30 something at the 8's head and did this and that. And anyway, the four of us went to the YFL 4. We went and we pre-qualified, but I think we were half a second. So I think Upper Thames beat us by half a second at Marlow. They got seeded and we didn't. So we didn't get seeded. And we came up against Tyrion, who were seeded, and they were, I think, probably the third ranked crew going into it. They beat us by 2 lengths at Marlow. And of course, what do you do when you're coming up against a crew that knows a couple lengths quicker than you at Henley of all races? Fly and die.
Yeah.
So, but I think we overdid that. We were already quick out of blocks. We were 3/4 of a length up on them at Marlow at 250. So we already knew. Anyway, I think we just went too far with that, and we focused so much on our start. We never worked on our transition to rhythm. And I do remember paddling up to the start and doing a burst. And they just said, let's just do a burst and see what happens. Thinking it felt like about 28:30 and looking down and it was 36. All of us know, and you think, yes, that's it. That's the rhythm. That felt easy. That feels amazing. We went off the start. And I mean, we had clear water at the end of the island, but we were also still at 40. 42 or something. Like we never settled, and it's no one's doing it deliberately. Because we hadn't worked enough on our transition, we never found the rhythm. Tyrion hit the booms. We were then nearly 2 lengths up, and we never settled. You talk about like a crew. I don't know what they'd done. They'd obviously, because they got straight back into their rhythm and they just sat on their rhythm. We knew they had a good mid-race pace. Because we never settled, we never found a good rhythm. Between Forley and Upper Thames, they were level.
Fair play to them, because I can't think of another crew that's hit and come back.
I've been on the receiving end of someone doing that. They hit it wasn't a massive, like it was just like a clip, and it wasn't like a smash up against one of the uprights or anything like that. But it was enough they lost a good half a length, and we were already had probably a quarter of a length of clear water. So we were a good length and a half, 2 lengths up. And so the mushroom cloud in our boat appeared somewhere between Forley and Upper Thames, and we lost by 3.5 lengths. I've still, in my entire rowing career, I won't call it a career, but I've never, in the last 2 minutes of that race is the most pain I've ever been in.
When you know it's going.
Because when you blow when you're really fit, the gap is, but when you blow when you haven't got a full proper winter behind you, it's a whole other world of pain and drop off in boat speed. Yeah. And I can't remember who was commentating, but when I watched the race back, we're coming past the enclosures, and Marlowe looking particularly ragged now.
Sounds like a cracknell.
I was like, yeah, that felt like that. So, and the reason my brother was in the boat with me, and I had this. It would have been really nice to sort of, because we felt like if we'd actually. I'm always now. I wonder if we found the rhythm that we found in that burst. Like, what would it have changed the outcome of the race? I don't know. So it's not like a big race, but it's stuck a. And actually, the other one that's a bit like that is whilst I was kind of doing all the serious rowing, and so was Dan. He'd done the Junior Worlds, and I'd done under 23s that year. And my dad had actually joined Marlow Rowing Club in his 50s and was doing a bit of rowing down there, and just within the vets group. And the three of us entered a 4, and like I don't know. At the time, it would have been senior 4s. Now it'd be called IM3, not novice, because I think he'd got a pop. Well, obviously we couldn't anyway, but that was it. He was novice. We were, and we at Maidenhead Regatta, and we got one other person to jump in with us, one of the other Marlow guys, and just because I wanted to win a pop with my dad, and but the person who'd coxing us had never coxed before and had only been in sailing boats. Right. And in sailing, you pull the way you want to go, not push the way you want to go. And so she pulled the wrong way, and it basically nearly capsized the boat, and we lost the race by like a canvas or something. So I was like, I thought this was a dead cert. I was so it's not the big ones. It was I wanted to get through around and or have win that race with my brother. I wanted to win a pot with my dad. And that didn't happen. So those are actually the ones that if I could change, I'd change, because
because life's about like what it means to you.
I think so. Yeah, I think you would. I mean, there's the, being like missing out on that AB semi at the World Champs. But actually, when you ask me the question, that's not the thing that springs to mind. It's actually those.
No, I like them.
2 races that I'd have. If I wish I could change the outcome. But I'm not one massively for looking back at stuff like that too much, I think. Try not to, anyway.
I think that answer tells us a lot more than you think.
It's a good thing.
It's a great thing. Just in terms of like your perception on like what's important and what moments you really enjoyed in the sport and things like that, I think that's like so much more of a wholesome answer than like, I want to be in the AV semi in that year that I didn't make it. Like,
because that's how I would have felt then.
Yeah.
But I think I actually feel really fortunate that I did rowing for long enough that I got some experience, and I did some stuff that gave me a springboard to build on. But I also ended up not through my own is it through my own choice? That's an interesting thing to explore. But I ended up out of it from a competition perspective much earlier than I'd have intended, and even from a coaching perspective, that kind of stopped for the full time in 2012. So as I sit here now at 42, I've had 20 years now of doing other stuff, well, as a competition, and 10 or 15 years not being coaching. Like, whereas had that not happened, I might have carried on, whether you're chasing the World Champs or the Henley Mill or whatever, till I was 35. I'd have only had about 6 or 7 years doing that. So I feel really fortunate that I've had, and I suppose with that kind of varied experience comes a different perspective on things. Like, say, my reality has changed a bit given the different perspectives I've had.
The intensity of rowing means that your life is on hold a little bit. So
your world is very narrow.
Success in that is, there's a trade-off. Everything's a trade-off. What's my question? If you could travel back in time to the age you were when you first fell in love with rowing, what advice would you give that young kid?
I'm just considering my answer because something springs to mind. I'm just wondering if that's what I would actually say.
It's a difficult one.
Yeah, because there's a few things. I'm just, what would I actually say? Don't do it. Just keep going fishing. No. I was going to say like that thing of don't accept other people's perceptions of your limits, but I'm just wondering whether that's what I'd say because I had the benefit of someone doing that. I got that. I ended up getting that anyway. So is there something else I would say? Do you know what I would say? I would say be wary of, I'd say make sure you don't make this about do something, like make sure there's other stuff. Because I just, for example, fishing was the thing I love. I stopped doing it for quite a long time. Don't be wary of making your whole life around this thing. About this thing doesn't mean you have to do less of it because it's as much about your headspace as anything else. And that because I toyed with the idea of doing a bit again, and I was having this conversation with my wife about this, and she's like, it's not the logistics. Yes, rowing's challenging, but it's like you can find ways of managing that. It's more your headspace, how much of your head and your emotional space it would take up, and she's absolutely right. And the other thing, so I'd say that, and the other thing I would say is the thing around be wary of that thing around proving people wrong your primary fuel.
Yeah, I'd me unhealthy in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's my experience. I would say, maybe a little bit of that is okay, but if you make it the primary motivator, that has all sorts of unintended consequences. Find another reason to do it.
Yeah.
Love that. I've got just one question, and that is, who are some of your rowing idols or the people you've looked up to even during or post your rowing career?
So, yeah, I mean, I've got to mention Jez.
We've got to get him on.
Yeah. Are you living in Portugal now?
We can go.
I'll speak to him.
I'll get some cheap tickets.
We'll go when Alex Gregory is doing one of his camps in Portugal.
He is one of a kind.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, like we're all flawed humans. But Jez has, like, there's lots of stuff that I took. And I think it probably, large part to do with, it helped me a lot. Ray Ward, who invited me to come down and train with Colin at Dorney when I was 17. And I think that made a big difference. That made a huge difference. I would say they're the people that really stand out.
Conventional, yeah.
I love that. I know I've said this before, but I love, like, when we came up with that question, my head was like, oh, everyone's going to be like the big names. But time and time again, it comes back to the people that had an impact on them personally, as opposed to like, and it's really interesting. It's something that's so different.
Well, can you identify, resonate? You know, yeah. Because I was just thinking around and like just thinking, I'm sure if I thought about this for long enough, there would be some others that people might know of more that helped and influenced, or that I looked up, to.
But I think that's why I think it's good.
Really, the ones that do stand out are the ones that helped me.
Yeah. And that's why you don't really want people to prep those questions. What does just pop into your head? That's the interesting bit.
Yeah, like that at a formative time, who gave you the thing that you needed at that time? Who was able to recognize what you needed? Who saw something in you? Yeah, it can be who demonstrated something to you. So I can totally understand it if, you know, someone's doing something that hasn't been done before who's similar to you, right? This is why it's so important that we have gender parity at Henley and the Olympics and stuff like that, so that there is representation. So that those sort of, I can understand how that, but yeah. So for me, it was, those people.
Love it.
Awesome. Ben Tipney, this has been such a fascinating chat. We've learned a lot. I'm sure our audience is going to love it as well. If you've made it this far into the episode, Rob Morgan, please leave a comment.
I'll give to hear it if anyone has made it this far.
Yeah. And then at some point, obviously, we would love to have you on again.
For sure.
And then talk about some other interesting things. But just in general, like this kind of theme about the episode is the exact reason why we have this podcast, because that's exactly the kind of things we would love to geek out and talk about, but like every day you might not get a chance to do that. So thank you so much.
Great stuff. And thanks for having me. Good to chat to you guys.
Absolutely. But as for today, this concludes everything for this episode. So on that note, easy there.
Cue the music.